I'm a liar. On the last video where we talked about Guitar Hero 2 and Rock Band, I ended it by saying we're talking about 2 game guides this video. And as much as I'd love to say we're talking about 2 this time, really can only talk about 1 here. I'll spill the beans. The second game guide I was going to talk about today was going to be Diablo 3. I opted against using Diablo 3 as a second in this case because as I looked through it, I realized it's actually still pretty relevant. When using the guide and looking through it, still pretty useful there. What exactly am I talking about when I say still relevant, still useful? Today's topic is game guides that are no longer useful, or should I say, literally functionless. A guide that you cannot use in any conceivable way to get anything done in the game and does not offer you anything outside of shelf space. Maybe the art can be relevant and discussion. If you were to try to use it on the game, couldn't go anywhere with it. The guide we're talking about today is none other than Destiny 2. I got a pretty complicated history with Destiny. I originally played a Destiny alpha back in I believe it was 13. It's been a while. I think it was 13. And then in early-ish 2014, they did a Destiny 1 beta. You could go to the moon. That was pretty exciting. I remember playing that, playing as a hunter, and going like, man, quite a good time. I was going right into my senior year of high school when that game came out. That July, I think it came out in August, early September. That July, I was like, bought the $100 edition. This is my game for this year. Let's rock and roll. Game comes out. I'm having fun with it. It's not great. Destiny 1 at launch. I got opinions. If you survived Destiny 1 at launch, where you had to get your Sparrow, you had to run back and forth, pick up the spin metal leaves, planet to planet, grind it by abusing load zones. It was definitely a difficult game to love. It had really good mechanics, it had really good ideas, it had really good structure, but the writing wasn't there, the gameplay loop wasn't there, the accessibility and the time it takes to get your character up and running wasn't there. The loot drops were not there. Oh man, Loot Cave was a tough time to be around. Then Dark Below comes out, and that raid is terrible. Crota's End was not a good raid. A lot of fun. Best 6-man track I ever ran. So then after Dark Below, of course, House of Wolves comes out. And at that time, I'm finishing up my senior years in the IB program. Didn't have a lot of time. Barely got the Mythic class in January of 2015, that would have been. Didn't play a lot of House of the Wolves. I enjoyed it, though. Never got to do Skolas fully when it came out. Barely got my Gallowhorn. Taken King comes out 2015 there. Starting undergrad. Didn't bring my PS4 with me. Didn't want to play Destiny at that time. I skipped Taken King up until Rise of Iron comes out. This is where it gets bad. Rise of Iron comes out. I switched universities to a different one. Whole thing. Pick up Rise of Iron. No life to that thing so hard. A month before Rise of Iron comes out, I pick up Taken King. Demolish everything in Taken King. Run King's Fall a bunch. Get all my loot ready to go. Rise of Iron. Smashed it. Loved it. Great raid. Good narrative. Strong time. Strong loot. Great support through all of Rise of Iron. Got the shirt out of it. Played so much Destiny for Rise of Iron. Fantastic. Great time. Just a good, succinct experience. And then Destiny 2 comes along, and we're all like, here you go, Bungie. Let's rock and roll. Let's get this bad boy going. We love some Destiny 1. Love some Rise of Iron. Let's see what Destiny 2's got going for us here. Destiny 2 comes out. It's not good. It's not good. We all know it. Better than Destiny 1 at launch, but somehow worse because it doesn't build on what was set forth after Rise of Iron. When Destiny 2 comes out, it's a big reset in tone, in loot, obviously, in character growth. More importantly than that, Destiny 2 is a reset in the progress we made in Destiny 1. Destiny 2 had fixed roles. Destiny 2 had a finite amount of activities to do. I mean, they all did, but Destiny 2, you were forced to get tokens. You were forced to play the game in a way that required you to waste more time than simply getting the loot. You had to go through mechanics to get that loot, and the loot was not worth it. The exotics were not great. The gameplay was slower. The skill up time was less. Supers were not as heavy. Heavy was not as heavy. They moved the sniper to the heavy slot. Don't know why they did that. And it wasn't good. Curse Over Cyrus comes out. I played it. I hated it. I quit. Didn't even touch. Didn't even touch the Mars expansion there. Don't even remember what it was called. Honestly, I didn't do it. Destiny 2 disappointed me so much. I lateraled over to Final Fantasy 14. Played a lot of 14. Put about 500 hours in a year. Never played it since. Great game. Highly recommend it. Destiny 2 Forsaken is that catalyst that propelled Destiny 2 from being on the ropes yet again to finally being successful. Forsaken, I played day one, $100 edition, because of course I'm a sucker. They've got me at this point. Forsaken was great. Reset the loot pool, gave everything a purpose. The loot was reimagined, the tokens were lessened, and everything was as it should be. The seasonal stuff was great. Really enjoyed the forges. Really enjoyed Gambit Prime. All of it was really smart. Shadowkeep comes out. Not good. Shadowkeep was not good. Didn't like that one. Same with Shadowbringers from that year. Didn't like that one. Shadowkeep wasn't good. Played it, too grindy, but not in a good way. The gameplay loop of Shadowkeep was do a main story mission, kill 60 enemies, and then do another one. And it was like, what are we doing here? There's no plot. There's nothing going on here. I like Eris as much as the next guy. There's nothing going on here. Played a little bit of the raids there. I didn't do a lot of raiding past Forsaken. But Shadowkeep wasn't great. Ran most of the seasonal model. And then they announced Beyond Light and Sunsetting. Sunsetting is the number one reason I started to wane on Destiny 2. Shadowkeep wasn't great, but Sunsetting was like, they're getting rid of all my gear from all this time, and I don't want to play this anymore. And then they announced the vaulting of content. Then they announced we're doing the thing of Disney in the 80s and 90s, where we vault content. We hide it. You can't do it anymore. We're taking out the main campaign of the game, taking out the Red War. We're not doing the other campaigns that you paid for. Forsaken goes away eventually. All you're left with is Shadowkeep on up, and you just kind of sit there, scratch your head, and go, why'd you get rid of the stuff I bought? What's going on there, Bungie? Can you talk me through that there? What happened? Beyond Light comes out, and I didn't really play it at launch. I got to it a little late. I enjoyed Beyond Light, ended up buying the $100 edition, and enjoyed it. Well enough. It was fine. Stasis was busted, then it wasn't. And everything else was super weak after that. Then, most importantly to me, was Witch Queen. That was, I think, the last great one for me. Played Witch Queen. $100 edition. Loved it. Witch Queen was great. Had a really good blend of familiar and new. The revamping of Void was fantastic. The focus on deeper gameplay mechanics and harder combat and replayable missions, and it was just an all-around good time. Witch Queen had good support. Really enjoyed the story there. Then I graduated my master's. Lightfall was announced. Didn't want it. Just sat there, looked at Lightfall, and I'm like, I don't think I can do this anymore. So I go and I skip Lightfall, and I haven't been back since. I've been so much happier once I stopped playing Destiny after Lightfall. But this is all to say, I've spent well over 3,000 hours across the Destiny universe, more than they definitely deserve. And Destiny is, bar none, the greatest game I'll never recommend to anyone. It is a game that every time I play it, I want to keep playing it, and I want to stop in equal measure. It's a game that the more you give it, the more it takes, and it'll give you something back. But what it gives back becomes less and less and less the more you enjoy it. And it's a game that I cannot recommend to anyone, and it's a game that I wish everyone could experience, because it's so good at being almost great 90% of the time. And the highs are unbearably high, and the lows are unfathomably low. And I've never played a game that pendulums so heavily than Destiny does. Outside of anyone who's played WoW for a long time will have this feeling of when it's great, it's great. When it's bad, I never want to touch it again. Never played Lightfall. Did not touch Final Shape. I am out of the Destiny game. but it's always in the back of my mind. Contemporary to the recording of this, First Descendant has just come out. I've been enjoying that with some friends. It wasn't my choice. They're like, let's play it. It's free to play. I'll check it out. It's like Warframe, but it makes sense and it doesn't have 15 years of baggage. It's fine. I can't recommend it to anyone. It's fine. But when constructing the video about a Destiny 2 guide, how do we talk about Destiny 2? You have to understand it comes from a place of reverence, honestly, it comes from a place of equal parts reverence and hatred for a franchise that I just wish would be better. I look at the franchise and I go, you are so almost great 90% of the time. What happened? This is all to say, the Destiny 2 guide is beautiful. It's gorgeous. It's one of the prettiest guides I've ever held, honestly. As a game guide that is not created to be a collector's item, like, say, a Future Press guide, such as their new Dark Souls Trilogy Compendium re-release, which I got a copy of, and it's gorgeous. As a functional game guide, the Destiny 2 guide is beautiful. It's got such great pacing and design choices and art and focus on mission depth, and it's 100% worthless. You cannot use that guide in any way. And all of that stems from the time with Beyond Light when they said, we're going to vault content. And so let's go ahead and dig into my simultaneously favorite and least favorite franchise on the planet, Destiny, the Destiny 2 guide, and why it troubles me so. Now that we've talked about my horrific experiences with Destiny, as any Destiny players want to have, let's dig into the guide here. The Destiny 2 game guide is laid out fairly logically. It has your field manual up front, which discusses gameplay mechanics, how the game works, how to move, the actions you can do, expectations there. Also has a list of campaign missions and the strikes you can do once you beat the missions. Strikes are, for those not familiar with Destiny, ultimately harder missions in the game that you play with 2 other people. Some of them are repeats of old missions, some of them are not. Just depends on the era and what they're putting out. Then information about the Crucible, multiplayer PvP, should we say. A list of the maps, a list of tips on the maps, tricks on the maps, and advice for the class you're playing or the character you're playing. It then has the director, which is kind of an atlas for the game. It has the overview of that, of course. The 4 available areas: European Dead Zone, Titan, Nessus, and EO. Also, the tower, which is your hub, should we say, your home base when you go back and you want to break loot down, open some stuff up. That's where you go. Finally, it's got the appendices, which include the bestiary, the armory, trophies and achievements, and of course, I'm using the hardback guide, so it comes with the bonus art gallery, which is concept art and drawings and that sort of thing, which is pretty neat. It's a nice little addition to the hardback version. Pretty art there. What better way to start this guide than a foreword by the famous and infamous game director at Bungie, Luke Smith. Anyone who's played Destiny has opinions on Luke Smith. I got nothing really hard pressed. Luke Smith's fine. Did a great job of the game. It's whatever. The foreword reads as such. The day has arrived. What you hold in your hands is an in-depth examination covering nearly every facet of the Destiny 2 experience. Whether this is your first entry into the world of Destiny or you're a veteran eager to continue your journey, I'd like to thank each of you on behalf of Bungie for your passion and for providing us with the rare opportunity to entertain you. Time is a precious resource, and you've chosen to spend your time in our worlds, fighting beside our cast of characters and battling back against the villains that threaten their home. It is humbling to say the least. As Destiny 2's adventure unfolds, we hope you'll find our worlds full of stories for you to discover and treasures for you to uncover. We hope you find powerful weapons and armor that change the way you think about playing. We hope the powers you discover change your approach to combat situations. We hope our worlds bring you together with other players, even if it's just for a public event, or as you discover the enemy moving against each other. We create these collisions because of the possibility of sometimes. Sometimes you will see other players in the world. Sometimes you'll stand shoulder to shoulder with them and fight bosses, celebrating in unison as the treasure chest they were guarding pops open. Sometimes you may join a fire team and chat for a night. Sometimes you may decide to start a clan and find other like-minded gamers. And sometimes, just maybe, you'll form friendships that last a lifetime. Our earnest hope is that you find our worlds full of adventure, wonder, and people who could become your friends. Thank you for being part of this community. Thank you for being the starring role in our story. Thank you for playing. Luke Smith, Game Director, Bungie. Strong opening, Luke. Definitely do agree with the sentiments here. I can definitely say with confidence I have made lifelong friendships from Destiny. I've talked to people who our sole connection was Destiny still through Discord and various social media platforms there. This is truly the most accurate description of Destiny in the positive sense. On the flip side, not included in this guide, is from a book called Blood, Sweat, and Pixels by Jason Schreier. Jason Schreier describes Destiny as a game where you fly around in a ship complaining about Destiny. That's the opposite facet of the same die for the same truth that is Destiny. The next salient point in the guide, outside of movement controls and combat, any guide's gonna have that. I don't feel the need to cover press right bumper to throw a grenade, press R2 to shoot. It's fine, right? You play a game once, you kind of get the idea here, and you see a guide once, you also get the idea as well. The next thing this guide covers, though, is the classes and subclasses. In the case of Destiny, there are 3 classes. There's Titan, Warlock, and Hunter. Titans are supposed to be tanks, Warlocks are basically mages / healers, and Hunters are rogues, assassins, archers, that kind of aesthetic there. Here's where things get tricky. Destiny 2 is a live service game. That's something we all know. It's a game that has been continuously built upon itself. They don't say the word MMO, but it's an MMO. Right? So because of that, MMOs continuously update, and the game itself will always change time and time again. Because the game is always changing, abilities and skills listed in the guide are no longer up to date or relevant. In the case of Hunters, which is the only class that I care about, all you dirty Titan and Warlock mains can go light me up in the comments. I don't care. I'm a Hunter guy through and through. The toolkit's listed for the subclasses, which are the abilities you can use to have certain elemental affinities. In this case, the Hunter has the Arc Strider, Gunslinger, and Night Stalker, differ from when the game is today. The guide lists the grenade abilities as skip grenades, flex grenades, and arc bolt grenades. For the arc, for the solar, it has incendiary grenades, swarm grenades, and trip mine grenades. And the Night Stalker has vortex grenades, spike grenades, and void wall grenades. It does not include the other kits that were eventually added in Witch Queen. How could it? They wouldn't know. So in that case, the guide has not up-to-date information, but it's not a huge deal, right? Same with the movement modes, the high jump, strafe jump, triple jump. For arc, doesn't include blink, even though blink was there in Destiny 1 for Hunters. They added that back eventually as well. Here's where you can't really use this guide anymore. Some of this information up to this point has been decent, but Destiny 2 has changed so much that this guide is no longer helpful for even thinking about looking at your class and who do you want to play. The original version of Destiny 2 had class abilities laid out in a diamond grid where you had to unlock the different points on the diamond, and you only had 2 kits. You had the Way of the Warrior and Way of the Wind. One of the paths, Way of the Warrior, had abilities such as Combination Blow. When you get a melee kill, you get health regen and you get more damage. Combat Flow, again, melee focused. You get your dodge ability back. Deadly Reach. When you dodge, you punch further. Lethal Current. After dodging, your super, in this case the Arc Staff attack, does more damage, creates aftershocks. You could either pick that as your kit, or you could pick the Way of the Wind, which had Disorienting Blow. You punch an enemy to disorient your target and nearby enemies. When sprinting, your dodge ability recharges faster and gives you a higher max sprint speed. Your Combat Meditation, when you are critically wounded, melee and grenades recharge drastically faster. Finally, Lightning Reflexes. When you dodge, you're harder to kill. You just throw off aim on people shooting at you. Those were your choices. In a grand space adventure, you could either punch a lot or punch less and dodge more. Now, you try to pull this guide out and look at this in Destiny 2 as it stands today. Have fun understanding the different kinds of verbs. Yeah, tell me where jolt falls into all of this, or tell me where you can blind enemies. There's nothing here that is remotely useful for Destiny 2 today. If someone were to be a Destiny 2 fan and someone says, here's the guide for the game, hope you like it, you can't do anything with that. The same true with the Gunslinger, right? The Gunslinger is a fire pistol for a super, pretty classic there. One of the expansions added something else. That's not a huge issue. But even the original kit for Gunslinger no longer exists. You have way more than 3 grenades. Incendiary, Swarm, and Trip Mine. You know, have Solar. You have Healing. Unbelievable amount of grenades there. The jumping is the same, high, strafe, and triple. The dodging is roughly the same, marksman and gamblers, but they did add a different part to the kit. Naturally, as things evolve, you get more stuff, so you can now slam a knife in the ground and buff people. That is called Radiant, which of course, at the time this game came out, Radiant doesn't exist. You have 2, again, choices for speccing out your Gunslinger. Way of the Outlaw, where you have an explosive knife that you throw and explodes after impact. Chains of Woe, where you get more precision kills, you get faster reload speed for you and your allies. Deadshot, when you shoot with your golden gun, you have greater aim assist. And 6-shooter, golden gun fires 6 times. Those of course existed on the 4-play nodule again, and you max out the kit, you can use all of that ability there. You can't turn a point off, that's all you've got. Final choice for Gunslinger is Way the Sharpshooter. You have Knife Juggler, where precision kills with your knife immediately gets you another knife back. Practice makes perfect. Each precision hit reduces the cooldown of your super. Crowd Pleaser enables precision damage with golden gun. Golden gun precision hits generate orbs of light, which restore your special ability or your ultimate, your super. Line them up. Precision hits with golden gun increase its damage and extend its duration. You get headshots or critical damage with your super ability, your ultimate, and you get your super back. The final kit, of course, has changed as well, is the Night Stalker. The hunter class that was added in Taken King was also included in Destiny 2 launch, rightfully so. Same super ability, Shadow Shot. You shoot your bow, you trap enemies down. Grenades, of course, 3 choices again, Vortex, Spike, and Void Wall. Movement modes for jumping, same, high, strafe, triple. Class abilities are the same, Marksman, Gamblers. The kit differs. Upper Pathway, the Trapper, was focused on locking enemies in place. He had a Snare Bomb, which slowed enemies down and disoriented them. Keen Scout, we use sprints and sneak faster. You can also track enemies with ease. Your radar in the top is easier to read. Deadfall, when you shoot your arrows with your super, you become traps, and the enemies, when they walk into it, become snared as they walk by. It doesn't automatically pop out. It's a one-time shot, though. Vanishing Step, where you dodge, you go invisible. Doesn't matter which dodge you use, you dodge, you go invisible. That's a pretty cool kit to avoid combat and to stealth by some enemies and reposition yourself, get some reses. Same with Way of the Pathfinder there. Lower path, the 4 nodules again. Very the same kind of thing there. Vanish and smoke. Throw a bomb, go invisible. Lockdown. Grenades and smoke effects last twice as long. You can easily control areas that way. Heart of the Pack. You kill tethered enemies, which is if they're hit by your super. You generate more super regeneration and increased mobility, recovery, and resilience for you and your allies. Mobius Quiver. Fire your super multiple times in rapid succession, and the Shadow Shot deals damage against tethered enemies, so you get more than one shot. You hit a tethered enemy with a shot from your super, you do way more damage. Reason I mentioned all this, of course, same deal, does exist. Same as Gunslinger, same as Arcstrider. These abilities are no longer the same. They don't exist in the same fashion. The verbs have changed. The way you can interact with your character has changed. Nothing in this part is remotely useful today. It is just borderline a tabletop guide at this point, a guide to experience a world that doesn't exist in reality. Next up are weapon classes. These have also changed greatly since Destiny 2 came out. When Destiny 2 originally came out, there were effectively 2 weapon classes. There were primaries and there were secondaries. You had 2 primaries. One of them was called kinetic. The other one was called energy. And you had your secondaries, which were considered power weapons. So let's back up. Destiny 1 had a primary, special, and heavy weapon. Primaries were like assault rifles, hand cannons, scout rifles. Specials were shotguns, fusion rifles, snipers. And heavies were rocket launchers, machine guns, eventually swords. All of this to say Destiny 2 changed all of that with, again, that focus on the double primary system. That focus on kinetic weapons, which would be like a hand cannon or a machine gun that just shot straight up bullets. An energy weapon, which could have been a hand cannon or a machine gun or a pulse rifle that shot bullets imbued with solar, void, or electricity. And finally, power weapons, which in the case of Destiny 2, combined your special and your heavy from Destiny 1. So now power weapons included things like fusion rifles, be it linear fusion rifles, which are precision weapons, or the other kinds of fusion rifles, the more spread-oriented ones. It included the new class of grenade launcher, which is kind of cool, I guess, but there were different kinds of grenade launchers, rocket launchers, shotguns, sniper rifles, swords, all of these in one slot, which is exhausting. Why would they be in one slot? They completely, in this game, nerfed the ability to use a sniper and a pistol and a rocket launcher. Instead, you're forced to use 2 mediocre weapons and 1 kind of okay weapon. They also took out machine guns in this game. You can't use your heavy machine gun anymore. You have an auto rifle, which is just like an assault rifle, but they took out the heavy machine gun from the first game. That's a beef I don't want to get into. But the reason I mention all of this is now, ever since Forsaken, it's back to Destiny 1 style. You could still use 2 primaries if you'd like, but it's back to having sniper rifles, having spread-based fusion rifles, having tube-loaded grenade launchers in the secondary slot or the green ammo slot. In this case, it would be called energy weapons in the guide. And in this case, the guide is no longer useful. Kinetic weapons have stayed roughly the same, but now we do have special kinetic weapons. So what's the point, right? It's just ammo type is green, white, or purple. And the slot, purple will always be the bottom slot, but green and white can cycle from top to bottom. It's just up to taste. It's exhausting how different Destiny 2 was from Destiny 1 and how much of a reset it was. And also how it's changed so much that this, even the weapon part in the guide, is not really that useful anymore. The weapon rarities, however, have stayed the same. You have commons, uncommons, rares, legendaries, and exotics. The caveat is, I don't believe anything exists below rare, or in this case, that would be blue. You can only have one exotic weapon and one exotic armor on any given time. They have special modifiers. The reason I mention all this is now in Destiny 2, commons and uncommons don't even exist. I don't think you can get a white and green weapon in the game anymore. It starts at blue, and then everybody has purple, and then you all have some exotic or gold. And it just means the loot isn't real. It just means there's only 2 tiers of loot, purple and gold. Blue exists to level you up when an expansion comes out, and then it disappears. There is no loot in the game anymore that is relatively meaningful outside of the perks you get in the game. There never was, to be honest. It was always get the purple as fast as possible. But in this case, the guide maintains there's more to it than just blue, purple, and gold, when it's always just been blue, purple, and gold, especially in the upper echelons. Same with Destiny 1, same issue there. They have a loot issue in that game as well. Finally is the discussion on armor. Armor is, once again, totally different. Armor when the game came out did not have pretty much any stats associated with them. It had some minor stat buffs, but the armor was statically rolled and you knew what set you were wearing and the buffs you were going for. And the armor is just fundamentally different. The way the armor in the guide is, it has 3 particular stats: resilience, mobility, and recovery. They've also added strength, discipline, and intellect, as Destiny 1 had eventually. Of course, it's not in the guide here, and in this case, the armor in the guide isn't particularly helpful. There's nothing in the guide here at this point that is useful in the game in and of itself. Even the armor gradient is also the same, blue, purple, gold. There's just nothing there in the guide at this point that's helpful. Next up is the focus on shaders, currencies, emotes, ghosts, ships, and sparrows. Some of this is still relevant. Ghosts, ships, sparrows, and emotes are the same. This is the only part thus far that's been remotely useful. For those who don't know Destiny, I know Destiny so well, this is just like I'm speaking a second language here. It's like I've got this, right? This is just like how I understand the game. Ghosts are a little cosmetic item. It's a little companion that talks to you. It's originally Peter Dinklage. It's now Nolan North. It just talks to you and delivers narrative in your ear. The ship in this case is a purely cosmetic thing that takes you from point A to point B. You can never drive your ship, but it's always in cutscenes as you go from planet to planet. Sparrows are the way you traverse maps. They're basically motorcycles that you hop on and can drive from point A to point B. And emotes are, of course, emotes. They exist as just ways to show off your character. Originally, you only had one emote slot you could switch, but they eventually made it to where you could switch out all 4. Emotes are emotes. You can wave, you can dance, you can fish, a lot of different things to do there, but those have all stayed the same. The way you traverse the map, your ghost has cosmetic, that's all the same. What hasn't stayed the same, however, are shaders and the currencies. Shaders here are ways to color your armor. Shaders used to be single-use items. You would have 5 shaders, and when you use it, you would have 4, 3, 2, 1. You can always buy more for more bright dust, which we'll talk about in a second, or legendary shards, but shaders were single-use cosmetics. They have since made it permanently usable. That's how it was in Destiny 1. It was an awful choice. Next up is Glimmer, which is money or gold, I guess you could say, or Gil if you're a Final Fantasy guy. Glimmer, you just get from doing objectives, fighting enemies, getting pickups there. Glimmer in this case was actually the same as it was when the game came out. Up until about a year ago, when they fundamentally overhauled Glimmer and made it way harder to get. They made it to where you get Glimmer by doing public events as the main focus, which is just like little world events as you play through the maps. That's the only way to get Glimmer now. In mass, should we say. You can spend Glimmer on anything for upgrading weapons, to buying certain ships, to buying shaders. Glimmer was used for that. It was kind of your all-encompassing resource. The next currency is legendary shards, which again, up until about a year ago, this was actually up to date. Legendary shards are received by breaking down purple items, but in the last year, they took out legendary shards. Legendary shards, if you're not familiar, are ways to power up legendary gear. You break down your legendary or purple gear, and you get shards out of it, and you take the shards to infuse the gear you want to use with the gear you don't want to use, and you just raise item level that way. That's what a legendary shard is. They took them out of the game, so they're not even in the game anymore. So that's not even useful. The final currency here is bright dust. Bright dust is a currency used to buy premium cosmetics. Bright dust has always been under fire by Bungie. Bright dust is earned originally dismantling items acquired from bright engrams, which were loot boxes given to you by Bungie. Now you don't even get those loot boxes anymore. You have to get bright dust by doing certain quests, or in this case, they're called Pathfinder objectives now. I don't even know what they're called anymore, which is suffice to say, bright dust is way harder to use now, it's way more expensive, and it's no longer relevant. So in this instance, the only part here that's still relevant is emotes, sparrows, ships, and ghosts. Outside of the cosmetic and vehicle focused things that are still relevant, The only piece here that does hold grossly true, arguably to a fault, is the power grind, or how you reach max level. That has stayed painfully the same. When Destiny 1 came out, you could get up to level 20 initially, and then 30 through item level, and then it went up to, I think, 35, and then 40 for character level by the last expansion. Then you'd have your item level, which is called power level, and Destiny 1 light level, where you would get gear that would get successfully higher and higher, up to, I believe it was 240 by the end of Destiny 1. Destiny 2, you got to character level 20, and then you would get your item level up to 300. Item level in Destiny 2, now called power level, is the same. It hasn't changed since the game came out. Item level, in the case of Destiny 2, power level, is fundamentally the same. Nothing there has changed. The grind to get to power level 300 is the same as the grind to get to power level, was it now like 2000? They just increased the factor by 10, and it's the same grind. You get successively better gear by playing the same missions over and over again. You then infuse the gear into the gear you want to use, raising it to that level. So you get a 1950 drop on a 1920 gun. You infuse it to the one you use. Now your power level is 1950. That stayed the same. The way you get that power level hasn't stayed the same. The guide here explicitly calls out milestones, which were little repeatable objectives, flashpoints, weekly things, call to arms, crucible objectives. All of that has changed names, but is, again, fundamentally the same. In this case, Destiny 2 in the guide, same game right there. The same grind for the same 10 years, same old, same old. Old faithful, should we say. Next up are vendors, which have naturally changed. Vendors are the characters you talk to get certain loot, certain weapons, certain drops from certain loot pools. In early days of Destiny 2, the loot pools were diversified. There were only a certain amount of vendors you could talk to a certain amount of things. You wanted Vanguard gear, which is PvE. You talk to Zavala, and you give Zavala tokens, get a chance at a weapon. The weapon rolls were static, so it didn't matter, but you'd get the weapon. You then talk to Shax for Crucible stuff, and you give him tokens from Crucible, and you get Crucible guns, and it was the same as Vanguard guns, but they look different with slightly different perks. But ultimately, the vendors have stayed roughly the same in that, like, you talk to them for certain loot or activity with certain loot. The number of vendors have changed. Some vendors don't exist anymore. Sloan doesn't exist anymore. Asher Mir doesn't exist anymore. Amanda Holiday famously doesn't exist anymore. Tyra Karn doesn't exist anymore. Shariah Hawthorne has changed some, but she's still the same person. Arcite doesn't exist anymore. Kate 6 famously doesn't exist anymore. The vendors here are no longer super relevant, nor are their functions with the discussion of tokens. Originally, when Destiny 2 came out, you would get your loot through tokens. You'd run activities, you get tokens, you take those tokens to the respective vendor, you'd say, I want loot. You give them 20 tokens, they spit out loot for you, and that was the gameplay loop. You didn't get immediate drops, you got a drop that you had to take to someone else to get another drop. It was a double drop scenario. I don't know what they were thinking, I'm gonna be honest. It's just increases gameplay time for no change in the way loot works. They just added a middleman. I really don't get it. And they, of course, removed tokens eventually. There was a meme of 2 tokens in a blue. Anyone who's played it knows about that. I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of that. What you need to know here, though, for the case of this guide in Destiny 2, is it's not the same here. The way you get loot, the way you play loot, it's all vastly different, and there's nothing in the guide that pertains to vendors that is still relevant. Everything in the guide here for the vendors has completely shifted. Some of the vendors are the same, but their functions, forms, and what they give you couldn't have been any more different. Finally, for this opening section, the field manual are activities and milestones, or the activities you do to get better gear. In the case of Destiny 2, as it is in the guide, or Destiny 2 at launch, you had a couple main activities. You had Crucible, which is PvP, Patrols, which is minor PvE, Public Events, which is a little more interesting than Patrols in the PvE space, Lost Sectors, which is like targeted public events, pretty much. We can talk about that. It's the verbiage doesn't matter. Just know that it's PvE there. Chest hunts, which are literally the chests in the game that you can find. It's not like it's an activity that you do on the map. It's just you find a chest, you open it, you get loot. Scannable objects, which are lore objects that didn't even have a place in your menu, so if you got it, you wouldn't even know. Challenges, which were basically world-specific bounties in the case of Destiny's universe. So back it up a little bit. Destiny 1's gameplay loop required picking up bounties from vendors to get reputation from vendors to get loot from vendors. Destiny 2 at base got rid of bounties for challenges. They were map-specific bounties that existed when you would start the game that day. So say you visited the Earth map, it would say, for one challenge, complete 2 lost sectors. You complete those, you get the rewards immediately in your inventory. No need to click a bounty. In hindsight, challenges were probably better than bounties. Bounties required you to go back and click and pick up and interact with it. So it was a fun, needy activity. But the consolidation of bounties into challenges was nice. They were not repeatable, I believe, or at least they were minimally repeatable, which meant that you couldn't grind it at your heart's content, but it is what it is. Then after challenges comes treasure hunts, which happen when you speak to the late and great Cade 6. He'd give you a map, you find the treasure chest, and you get usually an exotic or a gun or something. It wasn't anything too dynamic there, but those were your activities. Most of them were as you played the game in the PvE space. Some of you had to explicitly target. The one activity it doesn't mention is raids, because the raid wasn't out at the time the guide came out. They should have probably included the word raid, because like everyone knows a raid's coming, but the raid isn't mentioned in this guide. Interesting it wasn't mentioned. Nor was Trials of the Nine, which is high-end Crucible PvP stuff. Next in the field manual, wrapping this up here, is the milestone section. Milestones are the big weekly events to complete. When you complete those events, you get a big loot drop. The main milestones were when Destiny 2 launched, the Crucible, and Call to Arms, which is how you did PvP. PvP in Destiny is a tough argument. People get really mad about it, but ultimately PvP hasn't really changed that much in Destiny. It's the same kinds of events. They've added new game modes. They've tweaked the way the playlists work, but for the most part, what you got in Destiny 1 is what you got in Destiny 2. Irrespective of sandbox changes, that's still pretty much the same. Crucible-based milestones are pretty much one-to-one there. Next are flashpoints. Flashpoints in Destiny 2, no longer in the game, but flashpoints in Destiny 2 were a cumulative goal completed by the player each week to complete enough activities on a map to get a bigger loot drop. So if the flashpoint was on Earth, you would do Earth lost sectors, patrols, public events, complete the flashpoint, get a big loot drop, and move on. Next up was Nightfalls. Those are still in the game. Nightfalls are really hard strikes or match-made PvE missions. Nightfalls have stayed the same in Destiny 2. They've modified what can be qualified as a Nightfall. They've modified the scalars behind Nightfall. They've modified the way Nightfall loot works. Ultimately, this is the same. Nightfalls are just really hard strikes or really hard PvE missions for better gear. And finally, the daily milestones, which are objectives you can do daily to get bigger loot drops. In this case, it says a large stack of redeemable tokens. Of the stuff mentioned in the milestones, the Crucible and Nightfalls are the only two things that are still relevant, truly. So, what do we get from the field manual part of the guide? The part that talked about your subclasses, your abilities, your weapons, your armor, vendors, loot. It's not the same game anymore. The Destiny 2 guide up to this point is telling you of a game that no longer exists. It's telling you of a game where you had to get tokens to get loot. You didn't get immediate drops. You had to get little coins, do a little gacha, get a little loot, do it all over again. You had to do challenges instead of repeatable quests, like bounties is what they were called. Or it's just not the same game. It has changed so much in the amount of, well, not really. It's not the same game, but we found thus far leveling is the same. The same power level grind that underpins the game that came out in 2017 is the same power level grind that underpins the game in 2024. The requirement to get better and better loot to increase a fake number, to get better and better loot to increase a fake number that eventually leads to the same place of an expansion that overwrites the loot you just got and the level you just got is still relevant today. The activities you do as listed in the guide may not be the same, but that is the only truth about the guide thus far that's still relevant. The grind is the same. The way the grind is colored, the outfit on the grind may be different, but the grind right there, same old treadmill, hop on and run, baby. Don't look back. Look at that carrot. You got it. So even leaning through the introductory parts of the guide that tell about mechanics, none of that's the same. All of that shifted. It's all very different to where it was in 2017. But where the guide simultaneously shines and leaves me depressed is the campaign section. The Destiny 2 campaign, called The Red War, is honestly pretty good. As an introduction to the universe of Destiny, the Red War campaign, the original campaign for Destiny 2, does a really great job of showcasing the power of the player, who are called Guardians, the power of the Light, which are your special magical abilities, and the power of your companions like Cade 6, Zavala, Ikora, any of those awesome guys. Here's the deal about the campaign in the guide. I would love to see someone in 2024 play the Red War. You can't. With Beyond Light coming out for Destiny 2 back in 2020, Bungie got rid of the first campaign for Destiny 2, the Red War. They also got rid of the follow-up Year 1 campaigns for Curse of Osiris and Warmind. And so we're left with a huge section of the guide that if you were to pick up the game in 2024 is literally wasted pages. There is not a single part of the campaign that is playable in Destiny 2 anymore. They literally removed the campaign for Destiny 2, and in lieu of having something novel for new players, they just made you play the opening mission of Destiny 1 again. I don't understand why they did that. I'm gonna be 100% honest. I know it was said the Destiny Vault was for space reasons. I don't believe that 1 second. I don't know. Complicated. So, let's talk about the campaign, the Red War, as it's mentioned in the game guide here. There are 16 main missions in the Red War. There's Homecoming, Adieu, Spark Part 1 and Part 2, Combustion, Hope, Riptide, Utopia, Looped, 6, Sacrilege, Fury, Payback, Unbroken, Larceny, 1AU, and Chosen. They all sound like Brad Pitt movies. Fury definitely doesn't help. If someone were to come up to me and say, "Oh, you see that Brad Pitt movie anthology? Starts with Homecoming, ends in Chosen. My favorite was Larceny." I'd be like, yeah, man, but all 16 of these missions? You can't play one of them. Not a single one of those missions exists in the game anymore. They're just not there. So outside of me being genuinely upset that you can no longer play the campaign anymore, even though I knew about it for years when I was still playing the game, let's just talk about the layout of the guide here for the campaign and just see if we were to be able to play the campaign, how would the guide go? The guide has some cool niceties for the campaign here. It lists the recommended character level and power level, so you're just not getting one-shot by enemies. It also lists the objectives to do, enemies encountered, which is the types of enemies you fight, not only the faction of enemies that you fight, but the units that you fight within those factions. It also lists which actions you learn. Actions could be something like grenades or supers, the abilities that you can use as a guardian. Also, the allies that hang out with you in the missions there, be it Lord Shaxx, Cade 6, people like Zavala, Asher Mir, bless you Asher Mir, wherever you may be. Also has very cool maps for the guides and lays out the areas you can visit, and it does give you a list of when you might want to consider using your super or your grenades. In the case of your super, that's an ultimate, and grenades are grenades. Your super and grenades recharge over time, and it gives you a list as to when you might want to consider using them, which is interesting that it lists when you might want to use them, because in Destiny 1, you just kind of use them whenever. When Destiny 2 came out, the time to get your supers and grenades back were slow. Interesting, it does list when you should use it there. We're going to take a look at 4 campaign missions. We're going to look at the opening campaign mission, Homecoming. We're going to look at a social space called The Farm. We're going to look at a mission called Riptide, Fury, and of course the finale, Chosen. Right out the gate for Homecoming, we can see some incredibly well hand-drawn maps. I don't know if they were actually hand-drawn or they were taken from concept art, but either way, they're gorgeous. The team at Prima did a fantastic job with these maps here of showcasing where you start, the layout of the area, and the main areas you can go to. It lists them based on diamonds with numbers in it, so we can see for the Tower Watch area, the starting part of the game, you start up in the rubble, you run on through, teaches you when you should shoot enemies, aim down your sights, when you should melee, and meeting your ally called Cade 6, it shows you when you meet them around corridors in 1, and it shows you at 2 that you're finally able to use grenades. Really cool looking maps, and each part of the campaign for all of the missions has those really nice looking hand-drawn maps that showcase where you're going in the mission there. It also gives you a blurb about the allies. In the case of that first section for Lord Shaxx, says if the Cabal want war, give them war. A mighty veteran commander of the last city's forces, decorated battle hero and close friend of Zavala, Lord Shaxx is an imposing figure. Prior to this Red Legion attack, he ran the Crucible activities. The guide also has little gray boxes that inform you about different weapon types and different weapon uses. So it lists the difference between, in this case, additional weapons data. Learning about the differences between kinetic and energy weapons and how to remove enemy shields is critical to your success as a Guardian. Consult the Field Manual chapter for a complete overview of weapon classes and types, as well as information on weapon statistics such as impact, range, stability, handling, reload, rounds per minute, and magazine information. Then it goes on to the Tower Hangar. It showcases the storage hangar. Nothing really too intense there. It does teach you about the new jumping you can do. It teaches you at this point in the game, you can now jump. Titans have lift. Warlocks have glide, and hunters have pretty much just triple jump. If you're not using triple jump, you're not playing a hunter. I don't know, I can't help you. It's all triple jump or blink. at this point in the game now. What are we doing? Let's not, lie here. Then, of course, it goes on. Tower Plaza. What do you do there? Who do you meet? Zavala, information about him. It's a decent guide for a campaign that's relatively linear, but it's good-looking stuff in the guide. The map looks gorgeous. The layout is fantastic. When you use your super is beautiful. There's honestly nothing I can complain about for this section here. It just looks good. It's a shame you can't play it anymore. If someone wanted to experience the campaign, this does a great job of talking you through the campaign and treating it almost like a mental D&D game than anything else. The campaign ends with you on the farm. The farm is a social space that gets a little bit more information later in the guide, but the farm is worth noting because, again, as a social space where you could visit a postmaster to get items you may have missed, or the archivist, Tyra Karn, you could visit to open up effectively gun loot boxes, or Hawthorne, who would just give you certain gear. You cannot go to the farm anymore. If you want to go to the farm in Destiny 2, they brought it back for a small little season in 2023, and it's no longer there. So tough. Even this social space that was honestly pretty cool and nice to look at, nothing you can do there. Just another part of the guide that lives in your brain, but you can't visit it in the game. It's a devastation, truly. Anyone who's played Destiny before or is familiar with this kind of game knows there are different maps. Destiny 2, when it came out, had 4 maps. You had the EDZ, which is a European dead zone, which was in Russia, I believe. You think it's spit out in Titan, which is a moon of Saturn? It's a pretty cool map. It's got methane oceans in the game. It's great. It's a cool looking map, man. Huge fan of that one. Looks awesome. You ended up on Nessus, which is a centaur that is sort of there in that outer solar system. Cool little place to visit. Then you end up on Io, which is a moon of Jupiter. It's a really cool map. Big fan of that one. The map in the game looked very green, like a gradient green, and it has like cliffs and edges not dissimilar to canyons. Looked great. Really cool moon in the game. Thank you, Persona 3, for having me pronounce it EO. Go ahead and fight me on it in the comments below. But the reason I mention all these here is you can still go to the EDZ, European Dead Zone. You can still go to Nessus. You can't go to Titan anymore. That's gone. And you can't go to EO anymore. That's also gone. So this is really the only way to experience the planets that are no longer there. You can go to YouTube and watch footage, but this gives you a feeling about where Titan and EO could have been, where it could have looked for you if you had playing this game back in 2017. So the next campaign mission we're covering is one of the missions on Titan. Titan, that moon of Saturn there. Titan had a lot of Hive. The Hive in this game are not dissimilar to Arthas energy from Warcraft 3. It's a lot of Lich and Undead energy. The guide, again, has really great designs of having the enemies listed, where to go, what to do, and having just great map layouts for this place here. But more important than that, this section does contain red boxes which give you some warnings saying you might want to be careful here. One of the red boxes for this mission, Riptide, says dangerous jumping ahead. From this point on, it's worth understanding your class-specific jumping prowess will be put to the test. For the immediate area, watch your head as you're easily able to hit the roof of the deck platform you're on and fall short. Later on, you have some adept maneuvers to land that involve very precarious and broken gantries. Take it slow and steady so you don't plummet into the methane ocean. Arg! I'm on fire. Do you see those fireball-shaped objects being lobbed by the acolytes at the far end of the bridge? Those are incredibly problematic because they land and start a raging fire that can cause continuous damage even after you've moved away from it. Leap the fire, avoid getting struck by it, and keep an eye open for those attacks. As you have limited maneuverability on the bridge, elect to retreat and tackle those foes from range, or execute a movement mode and head in to slay them with extreme violence, hopefully without being overwhelmed. Mop up acolytes before taking on the knight for these reasons. For more information on notifications, consult the field manual chapter. I do like the advice it gives there of just consider jumping and taking it slow and being ready to be confident in what you do there. Final red box of the section says, Arg, come face my ire, which matches very nicely with, of course, Arg, I'm on fire. If you're having difficulty with this section, you may want to try the following plan. When there are only a couple of vandals and the captain left, move between the third and fourth set of bridge clamps. Focus your gunfire on the acolytes and knight, tagging them as they rush in so they have little time to establish themselves. Shrug off a bit of damage, then aim at a cursed thrall before the cluster of them manages to head down the steps. The acolytes are too close to use their burn attacks, and the exploding thralls kill off everyone. Basically saying you might want to consider using enemies against enemies. Pretty cool advice. I do like that one. Final point in this mission here, Riptide. Outside of course, the beautiful screenshots that show you an area, you can't go to anymore is the gray box that says, did that wizard come from the moon? No, it was mostly likely summoned from another dimension, but your greater concern is dispatching the two of them with extreme prejudice. Wizards are airborne foes, making weapons that strike the ground like grenades far less potent unless they are sticking to the wizard. Furthermore, the wizard has a solar shield, meaning solar energy weapon is preferable when removing this protection. Try not to stop firing at the wizard until it is defeated. The shield recharges a few moments after the wizard isn't hit anymore, just like a fallen captain. With this in mind, you must assess whether to clear out the foes first, who might stop you from fully committing to killing a wizard, or shrug off all attacks and focus your firepower on a wizard. As for the wizard's attacks, the orbs must be sidestepped at the poison cloud it unleashes when wounded, stepped away from. You don't want to be constantly impeded with poison damage in addition to everything else. The lack of clarity of vision through the cloud doesn't prevent your weapon from damaging the wizard, so keep on firing. I do like it does have blurbs depending on the new enemies that show up and talking you through what you might want to avoid. Also really enjoy throughout the sections there the bolded text that show what you might want to do, because guides have a lot of text and it can be easy to lose yourself in the text. But if you have a focal point as to your main verbs there, your main verbs in the sense of like your actions you're looking to do there, the bolded text tells you the most important things. If you read it just by the text, you'd be able to probably do pretty well. The rest of the words are superfluous. It's pretty helpful to read those words there. The next section of the campaign is going to be me getting sad that you can't go to EO anymore. We chose one of the missions here on EO labeled Fury, in part because there's only 2 missions on EO, so you can tell EO was kind of a later addition in the game. Definitely feels underbaked in the way the rest of the game felt at the time, but of course, you'll never know because you can't play it. The next mission here, Fury, which is the last mission on EO, a moon you can no longer go to in Destiny 2 at all, does a great job of once again having beautiful maps, beautiful layouts of the guides, good use of instructions, and also really solid gray and red boxes. The gray and red boxes for this part of the guide are scannable globes of darkness. Have you been checking the high storage ledges and other areas throughout this mining base for strange scannable objects? This place has a few black globes to check out. Don't worry though, they're still here after you finish the mission, and it's easy to return here after the mission to complete your search for them when you're not under fire. Goblin up all the energy. Taken goblins have another trick. They can sometimes link to other Taken and provide them with enough sustenance to make their target invincible. If you see a greenish turquoise glowing umbilical cord start to form from a Taken goblin to another Taken target, move the goblin immediately. This becomes more and more important as the mission continues. Pre-plan of attack. It's worth making a thorough sweep of the mainframe chamber before you access the computer itself, prior to the forthcoming Taken battle. Learn where the small sunken tunnel is, the cover opportunities around the perimeter, the dead end of the sand pile, and the lack of cover near it, and other minor cover opportunities like pillars. An all-around beautiful section of this guide here with great screenshots and great advice and nothing you can do with it. The final mission of the campaign is called Chosen, and it truly is devastating to no longer play this mission anymore with the way the guide has it structured, with the beautiful maps, the wonderful tooltips, and the excellent guide against fighting the last boss, Dominus Gaul. The guide does a great job of explaining how interesting the Gaul fight is. And so, for those who never had an opportunity to play it, let's take a look at living vicariously through the guide here and how Dominus Gaul would have felt if you were still able to fight him. Defeating Gaul. Reconnoiter. After heading along the outer spine of the craft, you face down Gaul and combat begins. Just aim at his head until he moves out of range and the complexities of combat increase. At this point, you should explore the structure of the battlefield, in this case, the command ship you're fighting on. Traveler's Light. Gaul flies around this craft, returning to bathe in a column of unnatural light from time to time. The column is directly ahead of you as you enter the fight, and it's not worth moving any further toward the front of the ship at this point. Linked tunnels. There is a lower section on either side of the upper spine of the craft, each with a tunnel links to a central tunnel and then to the opposite side. Here, you can rush to replenish your energy if you've been struck, or if you need to reload, change weapons, or hide. Note the tall metal cylinders on the craft at each entrance. Look for them during combat so you know where to head. Also note a second central tunnel farther back under the main spine of the craft, which is useful for moving back and forth between the lower exterior sides. Cover opportunities. The metal cylinders and various metal barriers along the sides of the craft act as cover. In general, though, there aren't many areas to hide behind aside from the tunnels. Columns of boundless light. During the second and third parts of the battle, the rear part of the craft on each side has a column of boundless light, which automatically recharges your super and abilities. This is critical to reach during an otherwise lengthy battle. Cabal Infantry. Expect Scions and Legionnaires to help their master all the way through combat. During parts 2 and 3, Incendiors and Phalanxes also appear, arriving on the superstructure to annoy and impede you. Periodically clear these foes, usually by rushing them with headshots and a melee attack to finish. These actually become useful because the ammo they drop replenishes your supplies, especially helpful for your power weapons. Begin by focusing on the removal of Gaul's first third of his health. Gaul spends most of his time in the air and has 3 main attacks. His foot stomp, executed after landing, is highly damaging at close range, so stay away from him unless you're waving a shotgun in his face as you charge forward and back. He has a grenade launcher that punts out a grenade one at a time, strafe or jump away from that. He also has a variation on a Guardian super attack, a flaming sword he lobs down while flying. This can damage you severely, so quickly jump away from it before it strikes you. React by aiming all your firepower at Gaul's head. Fast-firing rifles or hand cannons are great. Shotguns are dangerous but effective. Sniper rifles are tricky because he keeps moving. Grenades and launchers are tricky because he can easily avoid those projectiles in the air. Be sure to launch your super, connect with Gaul's head, and don't worry about wasting it, as there's more light available soon. Continue to punish Gaul's head until he loses his first third of his health and retreats to his column, the Traveler's Light. As Gaul retreats into his maelstrom of purple light, remove all Cabal infantry threats, as many as possible, once a new dropship arrives to deposit more Scions and Legionnaires on the superstructure. While you're fending off the lesser foes, step into either column of boundless light on the ship, recharging your super and abilities. When the purple column disappears, you can focus on removing the second third of Gaul's health. Gaul attacks with grenade launcher, 2 grenades at a time now, still has his foot stomp, and has learned a variation on a new super, a crackling maelstrom, and some deadly melee strikes. However, a quick thinking back pedal usually results in this attack missing. Return the favor with a super just after Gaul finishes his when he's most exposed. Couple this with any abilities you favor before returning to a column of boundless light and recharging. Repeat the super attack until Gaul's health ebbs away to a third. Alternatively, headshots from your favorite weapons will eventually do the trick, although you need to keep moving and hiding to avoid his wrath. The light is affecting Gaul, and the tide may be turning. While he's riding in his purple maelstrom, make short work of the Cabal infantry on deck, using your grenades and grenade launcher to clear the area and perhaps pick up ammunition. Bathe in either column of boundless light so your super is ready to go. Note the columns move to the lower part of the craft near the tunnels. Gaul himself uses both the previous supers he has acquired from the Traveler's Light after attempting to strike with his final super, a giant void shield which he can hurl at you. This is easily dodged if you watch Gaul conjure the ball and leap before it arrives, though he's more vicious and you'll usually need to use the tunnels to protect you. He eventually yields to several super attacks directed at his head, or countless bullets aimed at the same place. Keep on the offense, returning to bathe in more light for a recharge super until Gaul takes a tumble he doesn't get up from. The mission is over. The Red Legion has been defeated. That really makes the fight sound interesting, doesn't it? It really makes you go, I kind of want to fight this guy. I kind of want to do it. I kind of want to see if I can use my supers and absolutely demolish this man on his own ship. And it's a crying shame you can't. To wrap up what we just read there, and to wrap up the campaign in general, let's only read the bold text in the Gaul section and see if we could piece together how to fight this guy. Defeating Gaul, Reconnoiter. Aim at his head. Traveler's Light. It's not worth moving any farther. Linked tunnels. You can rush to replenish your energy if you've been struck, or if you need to reload, change weapons, or hide. Cover opportunities. Act as cover. Column of Boundless Light. Automatically recharges your super and abilities. Cabal Infantry. Scions and Legionnaires. Incendiors and Phalanxes. Useful because the ammo they drop replenish your supplies. Gaul spends most of his time in the air. Foot Stomp. Grenade Launcher. Variation on Guardian Super Attack. Aiming all your firepower at Gaul's head. Be sure to launch your super. Retreats to his column, the Traveler's Light. Remove all Cabal Infantry threats. Step into either column of Boundless Light. A variation on a new super. Return the favor with a super. Any abilities you favor. Headshots from your favored weapons. Make short work of the Cabal infantry on deck. Bathe in either column of Boundless Light. Both the previous supers, you'll usually need to use the tunnels to protect you. Keep on the offense. The Red Legion has been defeated. I think that's pretty good. I think reading the bold text and only the bold text could reasonably get you through the game. You do miss out on the details of like, what can they mean by a variation on a Guardian super attack? Step into either column of Boundless Light? What could that be? But in sincerity, it does a great job of listing the verbs necessary to complete a mission without needing to read all the text there. The bold would be enough to get you through it. And as the guide says at the bottom of the campaign there, we've only just begun. Get yourself back to the tower. There's little time for celebrations, but a whole lot more to unlock, including missions, weapons, and masses of loot. The battle is over, but the war has just begun. Then you get there, and you start the real grind of Destiny 2. Strikes, Crucible, and though the guide doesn't talk about it, the raid. Anyone who's played any length of Destiny has ran strikes. A lot of strikes. Strikes are, for those not familiar with Destiny who are just like, I want to learn about a game guide. Fair. Strikes are the intermediary game content for Destiny 1 and most of Destiny 2, whereby they're harder than campaigns, easier than raids, and eventually precursors to what would become dungeons down the line. Not quite dungeons, are like mini raids almost, but dungeons don't exist by this point in Destiny when we're talking about the guide here. So strikes are just harder missions than campaign missions, but easier than the endgame raids, and they exist to give you something to repeat with friends for better and better loot, or at least more and more loot, or at the very worst, different loot. Destiny 2 came out with 6 strikes. 5 of them were available on every console. 1 of them was only on PS4. The one that was only on PS4 was called Lake of Shadows. Of course, the guide doesn't mention it. The guide only mentions the 5 available on Xbox and PS4 at the time. The PC version of the game came out like a couple months later as well. It's a whole thing. But the strikes available at launch on every console and platform was the Pyramidion, the Inverted Spire, Exodus Crash, the Arms Dealer, and Savathûn Song. The 6th strike that is not available on every platform at the time was Lake of Shadows. Now, of the 6 we've mentioned, 5 in the guide and 1 that is only on PlayStation until 2018, you can only play 4 of them, and only 1 of them is in its original form. The 2 you can no longer play are the Pyramidion and Savathûn Song. Both of those are no longer playable because EO and Titan no longer exist. The one that has not been changed is Inverted Spire. That is the strike that came with the Destiny 2 beta, and also is just kind of the Stone Cold classic strike of the game. The 3 that have been reworked are Exodus Crash, Arms Dealer, and the former PlayStation exclusive Lake of Shadows. The reason this all comes up is not even the strike section of the guide here is relevant. The Pyramidion and Savathûn Song strikes are now only playable in your mind through this guide or through YouTube videos. Before we cover in depth the 2 strikes that are no longer playable, the Pyramidion and Savathûn Song, let's go ahead and dig into the Destiny Content Vault. We looked at it a little bit earlier in the video, but let's do a little bit of a deep dive here. We talked about how the Red War campaign, the main campaign that came with Destiny, is no longer in the game. That was removed in 2020. All those campaigns were removed. That campaign was moved in 2020. The 2 DLC places were removed, Mercury and Mars. Titan was removed, EO was removed, the farm was removed, the raid was removed. They moved the strikes from the planets that no longer existed. They removed the raids, no longer playable there. They removed whole campaigns, whole seasons. They removed entire exotic quest lines. You can no longer get special weapons anymore. You had to go buy them from different places. The whole Destiny Content Vault happened so that they could make space for new expansions and make space for new experiences, and even remove the ability to use older weapons. They put a power cap on them. You can no longer use them, which, for those who've been following since the final shape came out, they removed the power cap, meaning the power cap didn't have to exist in the first place, so I don't really know what's happening there. But long story longer, the Destiny Content Vault is what makes this guide so much more interesting, in that you cannot experience the stuff in the guide anymore. It can only exist on YouTube and on paper because it's no longer physically playable. They will bring back some of the places every now and again, but for the most part, can't play them. Just not possible. So, with all those in mind, the content you can no longer experience, the places you can no longer go to, the whole swaths of the guide that are basically now just theoretical and no longer accessible, let's talk about the 2 strikes you can no longer play, Pyramidion and Savathûn Song. The Pyramidion is one of the cooler strikes in the game. It's just a bunch of platforms surrounded by sci-fi robots, but it looks really nice. The map does a great job of lining out the areas of the game where you start outside the area when you get into the vault, and how the vault progresses all twisty-turny with the various zones. So let's go ahead and cover the Pyramidion as it's described in the guide here. Ashermere requests your presence investigating the main Vex pyramid structure on Io. It soon becomes clear this is the main conduit for Vex activity throughout the solar system and a base of power for the enemy. You must negotiate the vast floating platform interior of this void structure, navigating past laser defenses, hordes of Vex foes, including enemies very rarely encountered. After locating the main conduit, you must drop down and engage the Genesis mind of the seat of power. Super, optional, grenades, recommended, variations on the strike, additional hobgoblins, and storm minotaurs. The strikes could change as you played them, so it makes sense that they'd include some of the variations that could show up there. A more cunning method of entering the Pyramidion structure than attack everything is required, especially as the surrounding sides of the central sunken area are great for long-range sniping. Send your Medius teammate down there to inflict close quarters hurting on the assembled Vex forces, which are usually toughened goblins and harpies. Have your other teammates snipe from the side and offer covering fire, dropping any hobgoblins that have appeared atop the pillars. When fewer foes are presenting themselves, be sure to stand in the circular altars of light. There are 2 within the sunken entrance area, and have 1 teammate at each altar to quicken the unlocking process. With remaining stragglers dealt with, including a couple of toughened harpies, simply descend into the now open structure. Colossal Steps. Resist the temptation to gawk at the incredible Vex architecture, and instead make short work of the goblins guarding the gigantic stepped chamber. Drop onto each step, watching for the telltale sign of Vex teleports, warping goblins and a minotaur onto 3 of the steps. Have 1 teammate attack at close quarters, with the other 2 on higher steps, avoiding sniping fire. Continue a measured descent, with 1 teammate tagging each hobgoblin on either side of the circular exit. Then demolish the goblins and minotaur on the final step and land on it. Pass between the first 3 white laser traps, cut down the goblins in the connecting passage, then jump over the laser floor, jump over the next laser wall, and slide under the next. Then steer yourself along the drop so you miss all the lasers during the descent. First warp gate. Out from the laser traps, remain on the higher platform as you look across to the first warp gate through an archway opening that looks a little like a ribcage. Dispatch harpies, then goblins in your immediate view before heading across this exterior chamber. At this point, have one of your teammates execute a super. There are more than a dozen goblins and a couple of minotaurs and some toughened harpies on this platform. Don't overcommit and push too far forward because you'll be swamped. Instead, lob in grenades and make steady progress around to the warp gate arches. Here, there's a flock of harpies to neutralize. Expect about 10. You'll know if you've defeated all the Vex because this triggers the warp gate to open. Altar room. Once you're through the warp gate, time your movements through the next set of laser traps. They disappear and reappear, so move just as the lasers shut off. Watch the rhythm of the lasers before predicting when they shut off, and step through or fall down to the altar room. Conduit. A long conduit chamber is visible with a number of laser traps and Vex hobgoblins, goblins, and harpies in between them. Time your sprint through the first couple of walls, then take down the hobgoblins and then the other foes before heading into the tube-like conduit. Time the dash through the rotating lasers, so you sprint at either side in one continuous run. Just time it based on the initial rotating laser, and you should be fine. Then, drop into the teleport. Tower platform. The chamber requires you to activate 3 Vex altars, just like you did before entering the Pyramidion. The altar chamber is large and packed with Vex. Harpies are in the center, with a Minotaur, Goblins, and Hobgoblins on the far side toward the currently inactive Warp Gate. Thin out the Vex first and make the sniping Hobgoblins a priority. When very few foes are left, have 2 players head to the first altar to activate it. Reinforcements arrive each time an altar is activated, usually Minotaurs and Goblins, and a Hydra appears when all 3 altars are active. Employ a super if needed when clearing the area. Otherwise, remain on the perimeter of the room so you're not overwhelmed. Save a super for the Hydra, unless you want a protracted fight. With the warp gate functional, leap through it. Step onto a long platform in the central sunken area and teleport at the far end. Ahead and on either side of the platform on 2 small plinths are some stationary Cyclopses of very rarely encountered Vex. This foe fires a nasty laser, then a barrage of lasers when it's been damaged. Before you remove the threats, tackle the enemies atop the pillars and make slow but steady progress through this chamber. If you're dying, you're being swarmed by multiple clusters of Vex. A Minotaur and Goblins appear around each of the network towers you must hack. It's usually a good idea to tackle these tower hacks methodically, with your entire team focused on one location. Approach each of the white glowing small towers and completely remove any threats in the immediate vicinity. As the last Vex hostiles fall, have 1 teammate do the hacking while the other mops up, and a 3rd ascertains the nearest tower. Repeat this plan 2 more times. If you're skilled enough or don't have the time, you can try the slightly more dangerous plan of having 2 teammates tackle a tower separately, with the third providing covering fire. Minotaurs are especially deadly here, so make them priority targets after you've aimed at the Cyclops' eye. Conduit and final altar. Once you're through the last warp gate, drop down the colossal conduit to a roughly triangular altar chamber with numerous gaps in the floor, leading to a bottomless death drops, and a final altar to step into. This summons a truly frightening and massive boss hobgoblin, the Genesis mind of the Pyramidion itself. From the start of the battle, it's important to know where the boss hobgoblin appears from, the edge of the arena closest to the altar you stand on. Situate your team so that the available low block cover opportunities are known and utilized. Then train all your firepower on the boss's head as soon as it appears. Wreck him with your fire and sticky grenades until he retreats to a raised perimeter on the battlefield and puts up an impenetrable white shield. A host of goblins is then summoned. Stay active, concentrate on removing the multiple goblins, area of effect attacks work before the goblins spread out, and then stand on an appearing altar circle to weaken the boss hobgoblin's white shield wall. A second wave of goblins then appears on the opposite side of the front of the wall with the second altar circle to stand in. Remove the foes and activate this second altar. The white wall shield collapses, enabling you to damage the boss hobgoblin again. During this time, the boss hobgoblin may raise or drop the low block wall sections, so hiding places are not guaranteed. Instead, back up and use your favored ranged weapon, or close in and remove goblins with a shotgun, depending on your playstyle. When the boss hobgoblin is prone, waste no time in bombarding him in the central red head slit, avoiding his vicious and powerful red laser sniper rifle. This is the time to launch grenades and supers into the foe. Do it as soon as the shield wall drops. You can inflict the maximum amount of damage possible before another wall goes up. Note the red glow before the boss hobgoblin fires his rifle. When you see it, strafe quickly into cover so it doesn't badly damage you. Expect to deal with 2 or 3 shield walls before the boss hobgoblin loses a third of his health. On subsequent wall shield removal plans, watch for additional foes to appear, like minotaurs and the goblin hordes. More expert players tend to wait for the Vex to fall in and land on the ground, and they dispatch enemies near where they first appear while remaining in cover. Then they target the foes at the second altar from a distance. It's also a great idea to split up. It only takes one of you to stand on an altar. Make your team more difficult to fire at by attacking in all directions. With a third of his health lost, the boss hobgoblin attempts a rampage across the arena. Find cover, split up, and bombard him with your favored weaponry. Supers are reasonable at this point, but the boss hobgoblin usually teleports when he's hit by enough damage, meaning you can waste some of your supers sprinting to reach him again. At this point, the boss hobgoblin throws out a nasty belch of purple flames that coats the surrounding area where you're standing. Leap quickly out of the way and don't spend time thinking the cover is going to help you. The burning damage spreads out around the blocks you're hiding behind. Goblins are summoned as the boss hobgoblin continues his rampage. To further annoy you, he removes and summons block sections in separate areas of the arena, so split your team up and attack from 3 different directions. Watch for the purple fire gouts too. With around 1/3 of his health left, the boss hobgoblin starts a more manic assault, summoning harpies and goblins and sometimes fanatics to aid him. Deal with them in your immediate area and then spread your team out to 3 different corners of the map. Use block cover and train your weapons and supers on the giant foe until you blow his head off. Then switch to the torso opening glowing white, circle strafing around the now crippled foe until he finally goes down. I have never read something that made Destiny sound so cool. When you read this, it's just like, I want to play that. Why can't I experience that anymore? It makes the game sound so awesome. And anyone who's played Destiny knows that it don't feel that good. It sounds like, oh, you blast that dude's head off, then you blast open his chest. Like, that's great. It feels so mediocre compared to that. It just makes you want to play the game that the guide makes it sound like. It's so dynamic. It sounds like there's such cool inter-gameplay moments, but it's really just like, just dodge that and like throw a grenade. You'll be fine. So funny. And yet so well written. And it makes you wonder how it would have felt if they didn't cut those huge swaths of gameplay moments out. Finally, for the strike section, the one strike that was removed, that is arguably a pretty hot strike. It was a strike that a lot of people liked, but was pretty panned in a lot of ways. It was very repeatable and kind of annoying, but it had good ideas. Is Savathun's Song. Savathun's Song is now, of course, on the Lost Moon Titan. You can no longer play this one either. Let's see how the guide makes this strike sound. Savathun's Song. It seems there's a mastermind at work inside the depths of the base on Titan. A dark heart must be skewered so the hated hive can be removed from this place once and for all. Head deep into the Arboretum sector, battling through revolting secretion-filled chambers, shattering strange crystals, and locating a hidden tunnel into the deepest parts of the planet. This is where an immense shrieker is said to reside. Head to the source and defeat it. Lobby and Arboretum entrance. Cross the bridge and head up into the platform chamber with the broken LED wall. Engage the cluster of acolytes in quick and violent combat. Squeeze through the gap into the large open lobby. Head left, north, toward the additional hive foes. The initial hostiles include a few acolytes and a wizard. Destroy them and avoid the hive traps, the glowing anchor-like devices on the ground, which can damage and immobilize you. While a ghost hacks the door, spin around and repel a group of charging thralls led by a wizard. Execute the closer enemies first. Next, expect acolytes and cursed thralls to drop in. Remove the explosive cursed thralls as a matter of urgency. Use a grenade to soften up one of the two knights that also appear, but save them for last. Sub-boss. When the door opens, you may want to punt or lob a grenade to remove the cluster of thralls before they charge and separate. Instead, just back up and remove them first. The reason is simple. When you step to the second inner door, there's an ogre, knights, and acolytes in the green chamber beyond. Back up so there's room to find cover, or the ogre's facial maw beam can cut you down in seconds. Step to the side of the door opening, have all three of you focus on the ogre first, and then mop up the knights and acolyte stragglers. A super used on the ogre is not a wasted opportunity. Then head farther down the corridors into the Arboretum itself. Main hall and the pit. Make short work of the minimal acolyte threats, avoid the hive trap, and head through the pinkish entrance door into the main hall. Once inside the hall, make a left turn. Have two teammates remove the additional acolyte threats and engage a void wizard. The toughest of your team must immediately vault up the steps to grab a void charge, a ball of void energy, and run it forward to an area just below the floating hive shrieker. As you're cut down in seconds from shrieker fire, you may want to delay grabbing this and focus on defeating the shrieker using the weaponry all three of you have. A better plan is to quicken this by having two teammates hit the shrieker while one of you deposits the void charge into the receptacle, opening the path deeper into the Arboretum. This usually dismisses the shrieker too. Launching a super is a reasonable plan, but if you can finish off foes in the main hall without using it, it's helpful for the next major confrontation. Drop down into the pit and scan the strange chained object in the middle of the hive nest. You're tasked with finding more of these crystals, though the area is sometimes referred to as a plug, as it is sealing a lower area you must eventually break into. You can attack the remaining chambers of the Arboretum once you find and destroy the crystals in an adjacent cave, though variations exist when you enter different parts of the Arboretum first. Biodome Mezzanine. Sub-bosses. Head into one side of the sign chambers off the pit. Engage acolytes and a toughened knight in combat before blasting, or punching, the 6 glowing crystals embedded in the hive cave until the blocked door becomes accessible. Enter the mezzanine. There's little time to look at the view of the massive biodome you're in. Focus your attention instead on the vicious ogre. Beware of knights, acolytes, hive anchor traps, and a second ogre in the upper mezzanine you must pass through. Acolytes and 2 or 3 hive wizards back up the ogre. As you'd expect, killing all of them isn't easy if you rush the area, so hang back and remove foes at range if possible. Alternately, execute a super. After you clear this mezzanine, head into the second crystal cave. Upper and lower mezzanines. Reach another crystal cave in the biodome mezzanine, which is linked to the pit. And after dropping the enemy acolytes, destroy the 6 crystals. You're able to access the upper mezzanine area where you must halt a void ritual. This is achieved using the same technique as earlier, but there are far more problematic threats at this point. Take defensive positions behind and around the low walls and tackle the nearer acolytes and knights first. Dodge the anchor traps and press forward into the mezzanine area where 2 void wizards are being summoned. Make them priority targets for one of your teammates while the other 2 take on the nearest knights and acolytes. Sub-bosses. The action now borders on the ludicrous. You're expected to head into the lower mezzanine, battle against multiple acolytes and knight threats, take down an ogre, and then slot in a void charge that 2 shriekers are guarding. You can grab the charge, which one of you gathered from the area above where the wizards were, sprint down over low walls and die, or you can work as a team, grabbing the void charge when your teammates are ready to cover you, and then using the lower mezzanine scenery as cover. This is especially important as you reach the Shriekers due to their rapid-fire offense. Jump to the white columns and planters so you're not struck by too many attacks. Have the 2 teammates without the charge launch their supers, one to kill the ogre before the Shriekers, and the other to take on the Shriekers while the charge is slotted. When the madness temporarily ends, head down the L-shaped main hallway and back to the pit where 2 wizards are waiting. Remove them as threats, and the plug is removed, the anchor crystal dissolves, and you drop down into the Chasm of Screams. The Chasm of Screams. Hive burrows. Tear through the hive tunnels, backing up as you spot cursed thralls running your way. There's a horde of them, so don't race too quickly into their explosive ranks. Instead, back up a little and tackle the ones closest to you. Take your time. You want all 3 of your team's super attacks and grenades to be functional for the final confrontation. Chamber of the Dark Heart. Enter the final chamber and make a quick sweep. If you're unfamiliar with the area, there's a sheer and deadly drop with a floating platform along the eastern side and large multi-tiered balcony platforms with a huge crystal and numerous hive entrances in the western perimeter wall. When you're ready and your team has spread out into position with good view of the large crystal, have one teammate smash it open to reveal a giant shrieker known as the Dark Heart. You're here to destroy it. Not dying usually occurs if your teammates know exactly what job they have to do, in addition to killing the Dark Heart. First, split up so the boss and any incoming hive foes have to work harder to take you down. Have one teammate whose sole responsibility is destroying the Dark Heart, breaking off from combat only when hive infantry are on them or the Dark Heart becomes invulnerable. A second teammate should focus on the Dark Heart but actively remove enemy threats as they arise. A third teammate should be shooting at the Dark Heart but focusing mainly on hive enemies, letting others know when there are too many to deal with. This is the player who should be familiar with when and where foes appear. They can lob in a grenade to damage multiple foes as they arrive before they spread out. First, though, you should be trying to whittle down the first third of the Dark Heart's energy. Strike the eye, in particular, the jagged groove across the eye. Keep this up for as long as you can, even if you're being struck by hive infantry until the eye closes up and the Dark Heart floats to one edge of the battle arena. Then deal with the sudden influx of acolytes and knights. When the Dark Heart opens again, it floats to the opposite, higher end of the balcony, and an almost constant stream of acolytes becomes a problem. With one teammate trained on the eye and 2 others switching from eye destruction to hive infantry takedowns, make slow but steady progress removing more boss health. Keep moving and keep jumping in and out of cover to avoid the Shrieker energy bolts and later some void energy balls that the Dark Heart spits out in all directions. Save your super until the arrival of 2 or 3 ogres. These beasts can really cause you problems, but tackling them in record time and with perfect super takedowns allows you to quickly focus your attention back on the boss, or shoot them from 2 or 3 different directions so they can't blast you all. By now you should be familiar with stepping out of cover, blasting that Dark Heart's eye, and stepping back into cover before you're battered by its homing energy bolts. Once 2/3 of its health is lost, it teleports to the top of the floating platform with revolving ramps around it. 2 or 3 void wizards also make an appearance. This is another ritual, and it's stopped in the same manner, with 2 teammates each tackling the wizards. One of you has grabbed the void charge on the main balcony before leaping up onto the suspended and rotating ramps and central floating platforms. Slot the charge in, enabling the heart to be hurt, shrug off fire, and focus on stopping the ritual, even if it means you die. The final minutes of the battle involve you removing any remaining wizards and battling the Dark Heart in a real war of attrition, staying in cover and blasting the Shrieker before diving back into cover. Watch for cursed thralls during this time, back up so you're not struck as they explode. Launch any remaining supers you can before this fearsome eyeball blinks its last. I mean, it makes the game sound so cool. Why, it's like the raddest thing ever. It makes it sound like you're just flying across the map and shooting laser beams and blasting sci-fi eyes, and it's just like you're just trying to not get blasted by the next jabroni a corner away. The guy does such a great job of making the quest sound so much more interesting. When you actually play the quest, it's just like shoot 6 enemies, blast 6 crystals, shoot 5 enemies, blast 6 crystals, fight a boss, and you're done. The game only got this interesting when they were doing Grandmaster Nightfalls, which weren't even at the time in this guide ever. It wasn't in the game until way later. And it's just such a devastation that the guide makes it sound so cool when you can never experience it again. The text there basically gives the feeling of Savathun's song. Like, I remember playing it, and like on the higher tier Nightfalls, that's basically how it felt. It's just like you're just trying to get by to the next checkpoint, trying to get by to the next enemy, trying to get by to the next chance, and just not getting blasted by a giant ogre. I'm pleased the authors did a great job making that sound as interesting as it was. And so the strikes are truly devastating because they're so interesting and there's such wasted potential as one were to play the game and get through it. It bums me out to no end that those strikes are no longer playable because the guide makes it sound so cool. And it makes it sound like you could do so much there. And in 2024, it's just wasted space. It's theater of the mind at that point, reading through the guide and saying, yeah, we could do that, even though there's nothing to do. There's no way to experience that. Next up in the guide is the Crucible, or what is a real sticking point for Destiny players. For those who are not familiar with Destiny or those who need a refresher, the Crucible is PvP. PvP multiplayer is something Bungie's been known at doing really well, especially during the Halo days, and Destiny is no exception. They've had PvP in the game since Destiny 1 came out, and it's always been a sticking point for the audience there. It's been a real 50-50 on you gotta love it or you hate it. I personally always enjoyed it, but it can be very aggravating, and because the game is focused on using superpowers and can be very imbalanced at times, and you feel like you can't get a leg up, but ultimately Crucible is a good time, I think. So the guide, of course, does talk about Crucible, which has changed considerably in the last couple of years here for the game. So let's go ahead and dig into what the guide says about the Crucible. It does mention teamwork as a main focus on PvP. For those who remember Destiny 2 when it came out, and those who don't, Destiny 2 when it came out had a very slow time to kill. What I mean by that is Call of Duty 4. Call of Duty Modern Warfare has a fast time to kill. You pull your gun, bang zoom, they're dead. Call of Duty Black Ops 4 has a slower time to kill. It has more health. It has a different armor system. That one can be a little bit slower. Destiny 2, when it came out, initially was more in line with Black Ops 4 or Halo to that extent. In Halo, you hit all your headshots. You can knock someone down fairly quickly, but it still takes the better part of a second. Destiny 2, when it came out, was well over a second for most weapons in a time to kill since. They've since brought it down to under a second, and some things real under a second, so it's become more fast-paced in that regard. When it came out, teamwork was key, team shooting was key, so the guide mentions teamwork. Whether you're running with friends or a team up with strangers, working with your allies is an important part of the Crucible. If you're looking for a crash course in teamwork, consider the following advice. Communicate with your team. Use of team voice isn't required, but it's a great way to ensure effective teamwork. Your team's performance is bound to improve when everyone is appraised of high-priority targets and engagement. Understand the user interface, UI. It can be easy to develop tunnel vision in the heat of battle, but the user interface provides a number of ways to keep tabs on your allies. Team firing is key. Experienced Guardians tend to know exactly how much damage they can safely absorb, and most will decide whether to engage or retreat within the opening seconds of a firefight. Team firing helps take the option to retreat off the table. If you're communicating with your team, coordinate your attacks for maximum impact. Otherwise, just make an effort to join on any firefights that break out. In a close battle, a little extra firepower can make all the difference. Find strength in numbers. Try to stay near at least one teammate at all times. It allows for consistent team firing, maximizes the effectiveness of support-related class abilities, and helps ensure an approaching enemy never goes unnoticed. Just make sure you leave enough space to minimize the effects of incoming splash damage. One thing worth noting too about Destiny 2, it was 4v4 instead of 6v6 as it was in Destiny 1. So it also slowed down the amount there, so having to play close to people was way more important than when there were 6 people running around being goofy. Next up is the different kinds of PvP user interface, or the HUD, heads-up display as it were. Most notably the motion tracker, which is probably the biggest Bungie tell for Destiny. Bungie's very good at using motion trackers. They've been doing it for a long time. Rather than having pings on a map, something like that, they use a tracker that says there's movement over here. The motion tracker is as such. The motion tracker is useful in PvE, but it's an essential tool in PvP, and one that new players tend to underuse. Before you step foot into Crucible, remember the motion tracker's radial grid shows approximate locations of nearby enemies, direction and range, locations of nearby allies, elevation of nearby allies, status of nearby allies, locations of nearby objectives, and locations of nearby power ammo. Just outside the radial grid, markers are used to indicate detected allies, objectives, and power ammo that are otherwise out of range. Motion tracker ranges. The outer ring is 24 to 48 meters, the main ring is 6 to 24 meters, and the center is 0 to 6 meters. Proper use of the motion tracker can take a bit of practice, but it's a skill worth well developing. As you become familiar with each battleground, combining your knowledge of the terrain with the information contained on the motion tracker will lead to greatly improved situational awareness. Crouching and cloaking. The motion tracker has a difficult time detecting crouched enemies. Instead of registering as a steady glow, a nearby crouched target is detected once every 3 seconds. Of course, cloaking abilities such as vanish and smoke make enemy targets even tougher to detect. Great advice there, all around. Really just solid tips here. So far, this section has been more or less usable today in Destiny. The 4x4 call out isn't really helpful, although that does tend to help in Trials of Osiris, where it's 3v3. Just an all-around useful guide there at this point. At least the Crucible section is still usable. Next up are some class tips. The guide in and of itself does make a list on, like, the different kinds of class abilities and subclasses, like Solar subclass, needing powerful direct damage, Arc subclass, focusing on short range and multi-target attacks, and Void subclasses, focusing on survivability. But the guide in of itself does give some class tips depending on what grade box you're reading. So on page 140, it does give a class tip for Blink. It says, when it comes to movement modes, the Voidwalker's Blink deserves special mention. The short-range teleport is particularly well-suited to PvP. It takes a great deal of practice to master, but it's a remarkable evasive tool. Likewise, an Endless Cycle. While all subclasses feature intriguing ability combinations, it's worth noting Gambler's Dodge is a particularly useful option for Arcstriders who opt to follow the way of the warrior. The combination of Gambler's Dodge and Combat Flow creates a potent loop. Dodging near enemies recharges your melee ability, and your melee kills recharge your dodge. Helpful advice there. Does give you some tips and tricks about those class specifics. It also tends to err on the side of Hunter and Warlock instead of Titan, but it is cool that it does list some extra things for having some added benefits to your class. A nice little added flair. It, of course, does list different kinds of weapons to consider for range and what you want to use there, as it should, but more than that for me are the combat tactics found on page 141. The combat tactics discuss the skills you develop outside of Crucible will be useful within it, but competing against your fellow Guardians can be a jarring experience. Luckily, you can do several things to ease the transition from PvE to PvP. First, keep moving. This is the most important habit you can develop, and the sooner you do so, the better off you'll be. In the Crucible, taking cover is more a matter of breaking line of sight. Your opponents won't hang back away for you to hunker down to regenerate your health unless you're collecting power ammo. Dealing with a charge or reviving an ally, you should be moving. Understand ammo. You begin the match with a set amount of ammo for your kinetic and energy weapons. You can restock by collecting drops from defeated Guardians. You can only collect power ammo from designated spawn points. It only appears at certain times, and each crate can only be collected by a single Guardian. Understanding range. Each weapon has a specific range of efficacy. It's important to keep that in mind whenever you engage in a firefight. Understanding sniper lanes. Essentially, any high-traffic area that features a decent line of sight can be considered a sniping lane. This means each map's most effective sniping lanes tend to change as players learn to avoid certain areas. Aim for the head. When two Guardians square off, every bullet counts. Remember, the level advantage are disabled during all Crucible matches. If two Guardians are firing similar weapons under similar conditions, precision damage is the deciding factor. Pre-aim for the head. With rapid-fire weapons, pre-aim for the neck. At any rate, pre-aiming involves predicting where an approaching enemy will appear and making sure your sights are in place. As you become familiar with each map, you can use the terrain to help determine exactly where to aim. Crouch wisely. Crouching renders you invisible to motion trackers for a few seconds. It makes you a smaller target, but it slows your movement. Crouching can be effective, but timing is everything. Slide freely. Sliding is a great way to execute a level change as you're sprinting through a vulnerable area. There's more than a little luck involved, but a well-timed slide can drop your head directly under an incoming shot. It's also a stylish way to initiate a crouch, meaning that sliding allows you to pulse on the motion trackers of nearby enemies. Sprint often. The faster you move, the harder you are to hit. It's important to note you can't sprint and reload a weapon at the same time. Reloading would drop you out of a sprint, and sprinting will cancel a reload. But not in the cool Halo 1 sense of the word. Cancel your jumps. Again, an airborne Guardian tends to make an easy target. Avoid lingering in the air. Pressing jump while your movement mode is active to drop to the ground for some classes, or better yet, aim down sights for a split second to hit the ground even faster. Put it all together. Moving is good. Moving in unpredictable ways is better. Sprint, slide, jump, zig, zag through dangerous areas. Mix it up as much as possible when you're in line of fire. Keep your enemies guessing. Mind your supers. How and when you use your super ability is entirely up to you, but keep in mind your allies are bound to be grateful for any orbs of light you might create in the process. Be a team player. You won't always agree with your team's basic strategy, but when you can't convince your allies to follow your lead, it's generally best to follow theirs. The same applies for commonly debated issues like the use of super abilities and power ammo. If victory is your priority, do whatever you can do to make sure everyone's on the same page. Expect to lose. Losses are inevitable. If you're playing with a team of randomly selected Guardians, you can't realistically expect to win more than half the time. It's fine. Don't worry about it. You still get your Crucible rewards, and you have a new story to tell. Trials in the Night, you want to disagree, as with Trials of Osiris, but we don't mean that. To move forward, look back. Try to learn something from every death, and don't wait until the match ends. When you come up short in a firefight, you'll always have a few seconds before you return to the battlefield. Use this time to ponder what went wrong and formulate a plan to avoid making the same mistake. If you want to improve, practice. Practice with your favorite loadout. Practice the new loadout to practice new play styles and match-specific strategies. The more time you spend in each map, the more developed your situational awareness will become, and situational awareness is what separates top-level competitors from the rest of the pack. Really nice advice here. All of this is really helpful. All of this is really helpful in general for getting better at whatever you want to do. Ultimately, putting the time in and making it possible is a great part of the guide here, and this is honestly still relevant today. Everything mentioned in the guide here is still relevant for today. You want to just put the time into it. You want to get better, just play. Play better. Focus on growing and learn what you did pre-aim, pre-fire. Know where you want to go and trust in your instincts. It's ultimately good advice at this point in the guide, and luckily this part is still mostly useful. There's nothing that's been said here really that's not been that helpful outside of 4v4 and power ammo being picked up by one person. That has since changed in the quick play area rather than the competitive playlist. It does have a list of the various match types. It does have the common rules in a gray box, which says all quick play matches feature 8-minute time limits. Slain Guardians respawn 5 seconds after death. It does list the way Clash works. We'll give a brief overview of these. Clash is just TDM, team deathmatch. First team to score 75 kills wins. It's just kill people and kill better than the other team. Next one is Control, which is effectively plots or almost King of the Hill. It's basically King of the Hill. It's King of the Hill, let's be honest. Control uses a modified team deathmatch rule that awards bonus points based on location-based objectives. Teams fight to claim and hold up to 3 strategic battle zones. The number of points rewarded for defeating an enemy guardian varies based on the number of zones held by each team. Now, I'm gonna be honest, in Destiny, to me, Control is the standard game mode. It is the only shooter where I consider Control or King of the Hill the standard game mode. I don't know why. It's just always kind of been that mode there, but Control to me is Destiny. And I think this guide doesn't make that claim. It maintains Clash, being TDM is the one. If any other Destiny players in the comments below have any thoughts on that, I'd love to hear it as well. But the guide does pretty much lean for TDM being the standard gameplay there. There's one final quick play game type that's hotly contested within Destiny in and of itself, and that is Supremacy. It's kill confirmed. In Supremacy, a crest is produced each time a Guardian falls in battle. The goal is to ensure your team collects more enemy crests than the opposing team. When you kill an enemy, it's a red crest. You pick it up, you get a +1. If you collect a blue crest, or that's your teammate that died, no one gets points, but the enemy definitely doesn't get a point. It's just team deathmatch with an extra stat, but kill confirmed is always fun, and I think it does a good job in Destiny, but a lot of people disagree. But again, everything the guide mentions here is accurate to this day. Nothing there is too inaccurate. Maybe the scores have changed somewhat, but you can at least play these game modes. The competitive playlist, I think, is relatively accurate still. It only had 2 game types at this time, and they were Countdown and Survival. Countdown is basically CSGO, where you had to disarm a bomb in an area and the other team has to keep the bomb active effectively. It's fine. It was very map dependent, but the map contains 2 charges. One team is tasked with detonating a charge of their choice, and the other team must prevent this from happening. Countdown is a round-based match type. When a team fulfills or fails to fulfill the objective, the round ends. The teams then switch roles and a new round begins. The first to win 6 rounds wins the match. Countdown does have, the guide mentions, a revive token, where a gold icon in the bottom right of the corner of the screen indicates an available revive token. When the token is used or lost, the icon loses its color. You can only revive X amount of times before you can't do it anymore. The final competitive game type at this time, they've added more along the way, but the final one at this time is Survival, which is just classic team deathmatch with a limited pool of lives. In Survival, each team has a shared pool of 8 lives. Each death the team suffers removes 1 life from the pool. Outlast and outperform the opposing team to win a round. The first team to win 4 rounds is declared the winner. You can win rounds a couple of ways. You can win it by either having more lives than the opposing team or just capturing the point at the end. The time runs out in a round and you're pretty much even. So a couple of ways to win that there, but that's still relatively the same. Survival hasn't changed much since then, so that's still relatively useful there. Now that we've talked about the tactics and strategies you can employ for the various quick play and competitive modes that have still roughly stayed the same here, let's talk about the maps and how some of the maps are no longer available. There were 12 original maps. Let's talk about maps that are no longer available because they were vaulted. So 10 were available the first week. One of them is a PlayStation exclusive. One of them showed up for Trials of the Nine, which is a high-end competitive mode not mentioned in the guide. One of them was after the raid was completed, also not mentioned in the guide. Those 3 are not mentioned there. So 12 maps. Of the 12 total maps in the game, 5 of them were vaulted. Emperor's Respite, Eternity, Legion's Gulch, Retribution, and Vostok. 2 of them were unvaulted as the seasons went by, Eternity and Vostok. The others are nowhere to be seen. So we're going to cover 2 Crucible maps here. We're going to cover Vostok, which was eventually unvaulted, and is also a repeat map from Destiny 1, and Legion's Gulch, which was never unvaulted at this time. You can no longer play Legion's Gulch. Before we get into it, though, here's the layout for the Crucible guide and what the icons mean so we can understand the maps as we look at them. The blue icon are where teams can start. The team starting areas can vary between modes, but these icons indicate the most common starting areas. The purple is power ammo, where it shows they only spawn in a specific location at specific times. Locations and restock times vary based on match type. The capture points A, B, and C, where they are in control. the tiebreaker capture point, which is where they show up if a round of survival goes into overtime, and the charge, where charges appear in game modes like Countdown, typically on opposite sides of the map. With those icons in mind, here is Vostok, a map that was in Destiny 1 through the Rise of Iron DLC, and launched with Destiny 2 there, was vaulted, but came back. See the starting icons there in these beautifully rendered maps again. Here's the overview. Vostok is a large map with some excellent sniping lanes, making it one of the Crucible's best stages for long-range firefights. A scout rifle is strongly recommended, and those who favor sniper rifles would be hard-pressed to find a better setting. Most locations offer adequate cover in the form of rock formations and or man-made structures, but thanks to some outstanding vantage points, few locations can be considered safe from sniper fire. Vostok also includes multi-level structures. We're going to utilize all the information your motion tracker provides, whether you're pre-aiming or using a grenade to flush an opponent out of cover. Misreading your target's elevation can be a costly mistake. Considering its location on Fellwinter Peak, it should come as no surprise Vostok contains a large number of sheer drops. It's also worth noting some of these drops are located along important flanking routes. Airborne Guardians generally make for vulnerable targets, so before you leave across a gap, consider the likelihood of incoming fire. Take a look at the various placements for survival, clash supremacy, and control. It's very nice the guide lays out the different maps for the different game types. Let's start here with Wall. In most game modes, Wall serves as a team's starting area. It also serves as an excellent vantage point into adjacent locations. The structure that this area is named for combines a raised platform with solid cover options, making Wall a popular sniping point. Dome. Located within the borders of Temple, Dome brings some much-needed cover to what would otherwise be a fairly open battlefield. It serves as a key location in all quick play modes. Power ammo spawns in the structure during games of Clash and Supremacy. During Control, Dome houses Capture Point A. Dome features sturdy walls and some freestanding cover options, but it also has 4 points of entry. Coordination is essential for any team hoping to hold this location. Temple. Temple is one of the map's larger locations. It features some varied terrain and nice cover options, but the layout makes this area a popular sniping lane. Avoid lingering out in the open. In most game types, the fact it surrounds Dome accounts for the bulk of Temple's strategic importance. However, during survival matches, Temple serves as the map's only source of power ammo. Tram. This is a relatively large area with some nice cover options, but the path that runs through it tends to be a popular sniping lane. Tram's most notable feature is easily its gondola station. This open structure plays a key role in every quick play match type, and it serves as a useful vantage point for long-range experts. Cave. Located at the center of the map, this narrow passage features 4 points of entry. This makes Cave a useful flanking route and the closest thing this map has to a choke point. It's also an excellent spot for close quarter combat. Short-ranged weapons, short-range melee attacks, and splash damage all shine in the confines of this corridor. Bridge. Bridge is a relatively small area that serves as something of a 4-way intersection. A raised walkway, which the area is named for, runs between deck and cave. The lower road runs between the borders of wall and rock. It's located near the center of a major sniping lane, so be mindful of the surrounding vantage points. Deck. Deck features a level surface surrounded by series of steps and walkways. The central platform is a key location in all quick play modes, and while a low wall helps mitigate this threat of long-ranged attacks, this frequently contested area is far from safe. Luckily, the surrounding walkways provide plenty of escape opportunities. Turret. Turret stands as one of the map's most useful vantage points. This small structure features multiple points of entry, great cover, and an unbeatable line of sight into Wall. Tower. Tower features a sizable platform connected to a tall, accessible structure. The interior space provides an outstanding line of sight into rocks, making it one of the map's most effective sniping areas. Of course, this also makes the building's upper windows a frequent target for counter snipers. Rocks. This area may be defined by its large, craggy formations, but Rocks features a fair amount of open ground. However, considering that it's part of 2 major sniping lanes, it's generally best to stick near cover. In most match types, Rocks serves as one of the map's team starting areas. During survival matches, this location hosts the tie-breaking capture point that appears when a round reaches overtime. I like the way it lists the areas, gives good blurbs. Not quite as dynamic as the strike section, but it is still nice to hear about the different strategies and places to be and what lanes to look out for. Finally, for the Crucible section is Legion's Gulch. Legion's Gulch is a Crucible map that you can no longer play. I'm on this map vividly. It has 4 man cannons you can use to go across the map to get to the center platform. Had some cool hidden areas and walkways. Didn't do much with it there once they took it out, but it is a cool little map. Legion's Gulch is a fairly large map, but thanks to the massive Cabal drilling platform, much of it has been rendered unusable. The result is a stage features 2 very different settings separated by a sizable canyon. The damaged terrain means sheer drops are commonplace, but the map's border also boasts some less obvious off-limit areas. A once bustling city accounts for most of the playable area. Short-range weapons are very effective in this maze of crumbling buildings and narrow footpaths, but the cityscape does feature a few clearings and surprisingly effective sniping lanes. While there's a bridge running between the city ruins and the drilling platforms, you'll also find 4 launchers scattered around the canyon's edge. These devices allow for quick and easy gap traversal, but using them leaves you fairly vulnerable to incoming fire. Before you step into a launcher, try to weigh the convenience against the potential risk. Airborne Guardians make tempting targets, and designated landing zones can be very effective ambush sites. Of course, the various layouts there for Clash, Supremacy, Control as well. It's a cool layouts there. Love the designs for the locations. The various locations read as such. Courtyard. One of the map's largest locations, Courtyard, features a wide variety of cover options. However, it also has a Cabal launcher, multiple points of entry, making this long strip of land something of a sniping lane. Courtyard serves as a team starting area, a major movement lane, and source of power ammo in the quick play matches. During Control, it also houses one of the map's control points. Bricks. Bricks is a fairly small location, but it features 3 distinct paths connecting Courtyard to Middle. One of those paths offers a good amount of cover. Another is part of the decent sniping lane. The third path is a very narrow strip of land running alongside the gap's edge. Apartment. While this badly damaged building hardly qualifies as a structure, it does offer a good amount of cover for Guardians moving between Courtyard and Middle. It makes for a decent vantage point, and it can be something of a bottleneck during heated skirmishes. Alley. Alley features a narrow passage between an inaccessible building and a small empty structure. It is a useful flanking route, but it also serves as a popular vantage point for Guardians monitoring Courtyard or Middle. Middle. Located at the center of the cityscape, the aptly named Middle tends to see a lot of foot traffic over the course of any match. It features some useful cover options, multiple flanking routes, and a short but serviceable sniping lane. Bridge. Bridge serves as a straightforward path between Drill and Middle that features some welcome cover options during games of Clash or Supremacy. It contains a power ammo spawn point. Drill. In contrast to the crumbling cityscapes across the map, Drill features the industrial aesthetic found in all Cabal facilities. Despite some interior walls and an automated door, this circular platform stands as one of the map's largest battlegrounds. In games of Control, it also hosts a capture point. Drill is a suitable spot for defensive firefights, where the available launchers support quick transitions in and out of the area. When you need a moment to recover from heavy damage, a quick jaunt into Drill is often your best option. Office. While Office includes a sizable exterior area, it also contains the cityscape's largest accessible structure. The interior space offers a few bits of cover, multiple points of entry, and a Cabal launcher for quick access to Drill. A low ceiling limits the potential for vertical movement, but Office tends to be a frequently visited area. During games of Control, Office exterior space features one of the map's power ammo spawn points. Hotel. For it tends to be a heavy traffic intersection, Hotel is a decent place to recover between firefights. It features a central piece of cover and 3 points of entry, making it possible to escape from all but the most coordinated of attacks. Street. As a narrow throughway with some nice cover options, Street tends to be a popular flanking route and serviceable sniping lane. During Clash and Supremacy, it's also a source of power ammo. Shack. As a small structure tucked away in the corner of the map, Shack provides welcome cover from nearby firefights and great lines of sight into adjacent areas. Cliff. Apart from a few pieces of cover, Cliff is a fairly open exterior space. It typically serves as a team starting area, but during games of Control, it also contains one of the map's capture points. It's cool to read a map that used to exist and see the strategies you might want to employ all in your mind at this point. You can no longer play that map there, and it's devastating that you can't, because it was a pretty cool map with good ideas for launching around, but that's how it goes there. And so, unfortunately, it's no longer possible to play this map, but I hope they do bring it back at some point, and I hope they do consider bringing back all the stuff cut in this guide. But for the most part, the Crucible section here is still relatively usable as compared to the other pieces. At the very least, this side of the guide does hold up. One of the biggest changes, thanks to sunsetting and the Destiny content vault for Destiny 2, is the director, or the way you navigate the worlds. So for Destiny 1, you had to go from your ship to a planet, back to the ship, to the tower. In Destiny 2, you can now select the planet, go to that planet, go to a new planet, switch around your map as you want to go. You're not beholden going from one place to orbit, then back to the place into orbit. You can actually play the game in one fell swoop. The reason I give all of this here is the layout of the director as given in the guide here is so vastly different now than it was then, and that, of course, includes expansions. Of course, it's going to change there, but the planets listed don't even exist anymore. The nodes aren't even in the same place anymore. Some of them aren't even there. Let's take a look at the director section and see what has changed there for Destiny 2. The director section also does have maps for the explorable areas outside of missions, so we're going to dig into some of those as well. The director menu here has it listed out from 1 through 8, and they are respectively Earth, Titan, Nessus, EO, the Tower, the Strike playlist, Crucible, and the Almighty. Of course, Earth and Nessus are still playable. Titan is no longer playable there. EO is not playable. The Tower is playable, although the screenshot may show the farm. The farm is not playable. Strikes are playable, but they're different now. Crucible is playable, like always. The Almighty was only playable once and then disappeared from the thing anyway, so that's really kind of a moot point there, which is a shame, because it was a cool area. It was a really cool area. So then the guide here lists the atlas, or how the director section of the guide is laid out. It lists various sector hierarchies, such as the hubs known as social spaces, which is like the farm or the tower, public spaces, open areas like the social space, but something like parts of the EDZ, European Dead Zone, in non-abbreviation terms, on Earth, or parts of Nessus can have places to be very public. Activity-based places, such as lost sectors. Typically, lost sectors are world quests there. Lost sectors are like little mini strikes you can run with people for a little bit more loot than you'd be used to just out in the open world. It also has a list of the different enemy factions and their percentages. So Cabal is that red circle, Vex is yellow, Fallen's blue, Taken is black, and Hive is green. We're not going to go into detail as to what the enemy factions actually are, what they are in lore. You can find hundreds of hours of content of that online. Go watch anyone else for that. Like, there's so many good Destiny YouTubers. Go for it. And then it has the little icons that are going to be included in the map section, areas of interest. Adventures, which are like mini quests you can do. Barriers, things you can't go through with ease. Campaign objectives, where the missions are located on the map. Lost sector locations, those little mini strikes. Clusters of enemies and their affiliation. Landing zones, you can actually land and hop off your ship. You don't actually land the ship, but when you spawn, should we say. Material nodes, which don't exist in the game anymore, where you'd pick up region-specific materials for region-specific upgrades and region-specific weapon and armors, but those don't exist anymore, so they're a moot point now. Patrols, little mini objectives to run with people. Public events, which are little events that show up around the map. You can do them for loot. Public events that are secret, which are not really listed, but they still give rewards. Enemy chests, you can find extra loot for not a lot of extra effort. And lost sector chests, you can get the loot in the lost sector. The map will also list region chests, where there are some gold chests that only show up once per character. Gettable objects, we get some lore. Strikes, where you can do a strike if you want to launch it from the planet itself. Vendors, you can get loot from a character there. And world quests, where you can unlock more things in the world rather than just adventures. One thing the guide doesn't cover is adventures. It lists them when you can do them, but it doesn't list adventures. In a respectable MMORPG, they'd be called side quests. They're called adventures in this. The guide here does explicitly mention on multiple pages. Be sure to claim your free e-guide. Enter your e-guide code at primagames.com/code. Additional coverage includes adventures, lost sectors, world quests, patrols, public events, challenges, and PS4 exclusive content. So rather than having to include the PS4 stuff in the guide itself, they opted to keep the guide open for anyone regardless of platform. So they instead included that in the online space, and they included more information for the adventures and the side stuff online. Maybe they ran out of space. Maybe that was a Bungie thing. Maybe it was a Prima thing to drive website engagement. What I do know, for anyone who knows game guides, eerily reminiscent of Final Fantasy IX, but I'm not going to make that claim. Who's to say? We don't know anything about that. We haven't talked about 9 yet. I don't know anything about that. Don't look at me. So, let's look at the farm. We talked about the farm not too long ago, but here is the farm, which was the very first social space you can go to in Destiny 2. No longer exists in the game. Here's what the guide says about the farm. Welcome to the EDZ Resistance. The social sector has no enemies to worry about. It's a hub where you can meet up with friends, make purchases from an increasing number of merchants, store items in your vault, find scannable objects, and welcome new vendors as you progress through the campaign. Hone your character's prowess by changing armor and weapon loadouts, secreting engrams for the items within, purchasing Eververse items, and gaining reputation with certain Vanguard members. Down on the farm, once the campaign concludes, the majority of the vendors move to the tower. You're encouraged to join them as the farm's usefulness winds down. Note the perspective changes here to third person, and you cannot execute your movement mode. That glowing feeling. In addition to locating scannable objects, there's a good deal of larking around you can accomplish. Top of this list is earning the Scout Commander aura. This glowing embodiment of awesomeness makes you stand out from the crowd. It requires you to complete 4 different activities. Sentry ranks 4, scale heights, and thoroughly explore around the farm. Vertigo, wobbly tightrope walking is necessary. A wheel boost, swiftly jog on a rickety wheel. On Scout Patrol, visit a number of light columns before they blink out of existence, and then you get blue for your visit to the farm. The farm does have a few points. There are various activities there that range from number 1 to number 9, the Low Hill. This is where you appear when you drop out of orbit. Fountain, courtyard, and vaults. Access your vaults in this serene fountain area, which is where you store items you don't want to use right now. Farmhouse. Visit some tinkerers inside the house and scale the roof for a better view and some precarious wire walking. Watermill. On rickety watermill with Tyra resides. Did you find the small watery tunnel under the building yet? Soccer pitch. Play a little football between 2 nets in the northwestern field. The barn. The resistance members are busy building machines, and the majority of the later visiting vendors and minters appear here. Harbor and fire pit. You might want to expect the fire pit. There's some nearby lighting to flick on and off too. The landing zone is the farm LZ. Land your craft on the eastern side of the sector, on the way in and out of the farm, since it doesn't have a direct pathway to the rest of the EDZ. Scannable objects. What is this? Box of tricks on the rickety roof. My, that's a big gun. Look out for this collection of goods on a rocky outcrop overlooking water. A southwest perimeter check is needed for this cluster of goods. Do you enjoy sacks on rocks? Check the southern perimeter. Next, the people you can visit. You can visit the postmaster, who's named Darby 5530. Darby will bring loot that you may have missed from the area. Tess Everest, the Eververse person, the premium store. She's always ready to sell you some silver, which you buy with actual money, and just some cosmetics there. Tyra Karn, archivist. She is the crypto archaeologist or cryptarch. She decodes engrams, which gives you specific loot once you decode there. She is replaced by Rahul eventually in the tower. We all love Rahul. Hawthorne, farm overseer. She is the leader of the resistance in the EDZ, and she also can sell you some loot. Lord Shax, Crucible Overseer. Lord Shax is the helmeted runner of the Crucible. You can go to him to drop off some tokens from the Crucible. He will also go to the tower after you beat the missions. Our site 9940, the gunsmith. You can always bring him some tokens, and he'll give you some reputation, and for some gunsmith gear, he gets replaced by Banshee in the tower. Cage 6, Hunter Vanguard. So you've seen the late Cage 6. You can give him some special maps to investigate the area. Again, he goes to the tower and eventually disappears from the game, so that's always exciting. Ikora Ray, Warlock Vanguard. Same deal as him, only character still alive. Commander Zavala, same thing as Cade, only character still alive. A shame Lance Reddick died. Big fan. I've heard Keith David did a great job as Zavala in the next expansion. I haven't played it, can't speak to it, but I like Keith David. He's good in basically everything I've seen him in. And played, actually. He's being Saints Row. That's it for the farm. There's not much there. It's just a mini tower social space, but it's a shame you can't use it anymore. You can only kind of live it in your dreams there in the guide. It was a cool area. They brought it back once for a little season, but it didn't stay. I don't know. I dug it. I actually preferred it to the tower. It had a lot more personality, but that's how it goes. You got replaced by the tower, as Destinies want to do, and now you just can't experience it anymore, so that's how that goes. Next up is the overview of the EDZ, the European Dead Zone, somewhere in Russia, no doubt. Here's the EDZ as it's listed in the guide. Cabal, Fallen, and Taken. Cabal make up the bulk, with some Fallen and a little bit of Taken. After the destruction of the last city, survivors of humanity fled to the forests and caves in order to recover. Keen to crush any possible insurrection, Dominus Gaul established a sprawling base of operations on the western side of this region, away from the pre-Golden Age structures and old settlements that dot the landscape. Hidden away within the woods are the remains of the Traveler's Might, shards that help restore Guardian's power. Other enemies also fight for dominance, expect incursions of Fallen throughout the region, and the odd and terrifying appearance of Taken from time to time. Progression and initial activities. You first access the EDZ after the campaign mission Spark. At this point, when you touch down in Trostland, you have a variety of activities to attempt, generally in the southeast part of the region. However, you can explore the Cabal base in the west if you're feeling foolhardy or brave. Following flowchart details their activities and their progression. It does list the various areas. There's a lot of them. We're not going to go point to point, but I'll leave it up here if you want to read them all in perpetuity. Just pause the video, take a look explicitly. I will leave the map up as we talk about the progression of the initial activities side quests. You can see the various landing zones, sectors, and the activities for the campaigns there. Lost sectors, public spaces. You can also see here the adventures. Calling them home, Poor Reception, New Frontier, and Frame Job. You can read about them more apparently if you had the digital guide for this online. Shout out to not putting it in the book. You can do the campaign missions Spark and Combustion, as well as the world quests Enhance, Odd Symptoms, Differential Diagnosis, and Experimental Treatment. The progression is as such. You do Spark, you land in the Trostland, you speak with Devrim, the merchant and leader, I suppose, of the area. You can do Calling Them Home, Poor Reception, and New Frontier. You can do Combustion. You can then do World Quest Enhance, Frame Job. You then go to Titan. You don't really get to do all of them there at once, but you go to Titan and then you come back. It doesn't say when to do 1A, B, and C. It looks like it's all tied to Enhance, so I wish I gave that heads up there, but you would then end up in Titan, and that's the next map of the game. You then eventually come back to the European Dead Zone, where it says Return Visit Activities. After you complete the campaign, you leave the EDZ visiting Titan, Nessus, and EO. Then you make a return visit to the EDZ, focus on the annihilation of as many Cabal as you can within the various sectors of the main western base here in this region. After that, you complete the campaign off-world, you visit the Almighty. Here's where it becomes accessible between these 2 points. More map here. Same legend, by the way. with the various campaign missions, strikes. The strikes finally unlock at this point. And way more adventures, from Dark Alliance, Reverse the Polarity, Getting Your Hands Dirty, Unsafe and Any Speed, Red Legion, Black Oil, No Safe Distance, Anti-Air, Stop and Go, and Supply and Demand. The flowchart is as such: Patrols, Landing Zone, various adventures, Payback, Landing Zone, Unbroken, Landing Zone, more adventures, the strikes unlock, Larceny, adventures, finish the campaign. Then it does have a really cool thing of having a matrix or a series of tables that you can view the EDZ on. It shows the various names of the places, what type of space they are, the adventures available there, the lost sections available there, can you land there, any material nodes, what are the patrols, any public events that are full and accessible on the map or hidden, enemy chests, region chests, lost sector chests, scannable objects, and vendors, as well as strikes and world quests. And it's cool to see them all listed out. A lot of cool things on that table there. Very helpful to visit that table and see what you can do depending on your region. Now I'm going to look at one area of the game, the Trust Lands, which is where Devrim K, the leader of the EDZ, I suppose, or at least the Resistance on the EDZ, lives there. It's cool, this map. It has, maps kind of like the campaign missions. It's this giant map with various points, 1A, 1D, 1E, 5. The blues are as we established before, the nodes, there's the lost sectors, and it's a very busy map. It has some writing involved in it. Shows you it's mostly Fallen and some Cabal. The Trust Land is a hub of activity centered on the EDZ vendor Devrim K, who is sniping from the central landmark, the Ruined Church. Expect Fallen forces all around his location, as well as the only available access to both Mavic Square and Salt Mines. Notice the landing zone, which is helpful for a quick rendezvous with Devrim, as well as the road link westward back down to the outskirts. Areas of interest: West entrance road to outskirts. The U-shaped descent from the outskirts with a pedestrian shortcut through a building prior to accessing the Sparrow ends at a building marked Wowser. Think of this as the main west entrance into the Trostland. Check inside for a region chest. The ruined tenement building just east of here on the raised ground has fallen dregs and vandals along with another region chest. Graveyard. Fallen congregated this area that comprises an overgrown ruin west and the main graveyard south of the church east. A deadly chasm runs along the southern perimeter. Expect to fight mainly Fallen, but occasionally Cabal forces during secret public event skirmishes here. Church. The central landmark of the Trostland, this shell of an old church houses Devrim in the steeple. South has a basement entrance to a lost sector. The church is open, allowing access to and from the alleyways around the structure. This is a good spot to hide in if combat is taking its toll. Salt Mines entrance. Clusters of Fallen guard the entrance to the Salt Mine sector along the northern perimeter of the Trostland. On the northwest and northeast sides are interior and lost sector entrances. East entrance road to Mavic Square. Don't overlook the winding street that allows access via the debris-filled remains of a tenement block to and from Mavic Square. Expect pockets of Fallen resistance on either side of the street. Then there's various lost sectors and how to get there. There's an entrance there for Widow's Walk, Atrium, and Terminus East. It all is cool that it lists how to get there with, hands on the compact rooms. You can go into the church. You can also go to killing the dregs and then entering the hole there by the tube station. It's a very neat area there with lots of cool designs. Then lists various enemy clusters of Fallen, 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 and Fallen. The adventures of Frame Job and Stealing from Thieves, where it's located. Campaign missions, of course, Combustion, World Quest, Gift of the Gods, as well as the public events, which is Glimmer Extraction. It does not list how to make it a expert public event, but it does at least list that there is public events there, though it doesn't give you more than that. Finally, it lists the secret events like high value targets, where they're located, skirmishes, how to do them, and of course the region chests and the vendor of Devrim K. Some patrols, which are just repeatable missions, but it doesn't give you more information than that, and then scannable objects and where to find them. It's a cool map that shows how lived in the world could be. It's a shame that they removed a lot of these activities here, but at least you can visit the area and see what could have been if you had played this back in 2017. Next up is the EO areas, EO being that one moon of Jupiter. I like EO. I think EO is cool. EO is 3 zones. It's severely underbaked. It's the last place of the campaign you go to before you go back to Earth. It's kind of trash. It's mostly Taken, Vex, and a little bit of Cabal. I mean, a smidge of Cabal. Not much to write home about there. Of course, it lists the locations and the objectives there. A partially terraformed planetoid orbiting Jupiter, EO was abandoned by the Traveler, the Mycora Ray, and the Warlock Guardian. Consider the area around the Echo Mesa mountain to be sacred. Currently, this region has seen recent Cabal activity, though the Red Legions appear to be actively fleeing the world rather than savaging it. The reason may involve some concerning anomalies detected by Asher Mir. Although this area has examples of impressive Vex architecture, the telltale sign of Taken activity are present throughout this place. Progression activities. Exploration on EO begins once you arrive at the beginning of the campaign mission Sacrilege. You stay here for a total of 2 campaign missions, after which you return to the EDZ. During this time and any time afterward, you are free to explore this region and complete any world quest and adventures you deem necessary. The following flowchart details this progression. You start with the campaign Sacrilege, then Fury. You can do the Pyramidion, various adventures, world quests, and then that's the EO. There's not too many areas there. You see the table was split in two as opposed to a double splash page like the EDZ, but it's still contains the same information, and it basically shows it's a relatively small zone. To wrap up, EO is the Lost Oasis. I think it's a pretty cool side of the map. It's a very large map without a lot of activity there. It does have some cool things to say about it. You see a lot of blue clusters there for when you can pick up some loot. Lost Oasis is easily the largest sector on this moon. It contains a good deal of tiny cave alcoves to find, taken foes scattered across the open mesa plateaus, and a half dozen ancient and gigantic trees now frozen like stone. The two biggest have an underground tunnel linking them. There are roads around the perimeter and a river bisecting the general area. This is also the hub where you're maneuvering to all the other sectors on EO. There's a lot of areas of interest here. It has 18 areas. The first is the road to Terra Base Charon. The main road narrows and the cliffs close in as you attempt to head toward Terra Base Charon. Go here mainly to access the missions. Giant tree hole. There's a hole in the north side of the rock wall allowing access into the ancient remains of a tree. There's a little inside, but outside is an adventure to access. An upper tunnel connects to a small ledge on the west side of the hole where you can find a scannable object. Waterlogged gorge. Northeast of the plateau cluster near the landing zone is a waterlogged floor close to the lost sector. Tree log ramp. It's easier to access heading from southeast to northwest, but this gigantic hollow log makes a great ramp if you're riding a sparrow. It's also a good landmark to spot. Note the nearby plateau to the west with a cluster of taken foes and a scannable object to the east. Main Mesa Road. The rough center of this sector is a winding, rough road that takes a diagonal path from one of the rupture entrances. Area of interest 12. All the way to Terra Base Charon, entrance 1. There are plateaus on both sides of this road. West Cliffs. A small opening in the rock plateau to the east of this point takes you to a little ledge and into the cavern with the region chest inside. The entire western edge of this area is a death plummet. Stay on solid ground. Main Mesa Plateau. Between two gigantic tree forms, 8 and 9, is a large plateau where you'll always find taken to battle. Also, there are usually other activities, typically full events, to attempt. You can use plenty of low rocks as cover. Mesa Tunnel, west entrance. Amid the massive tangle of roots of an ancient dead tree is an entrance to a winding interior tunnel with material nodes, a region chest, and taken to battle. Note the rough path of this tunnel shown on the map guide. Mesa Tunnel and Stream East entrance. The other entrance in the Mesa Tunnel is at the large tree stump on the eastern side of the sector. This also marks the location of a gorge stream and a connecting road running alongside the eastern side of the map. Eastern Road. This connects the log ramp and Terra Base Charon entrance and curves around to the south of the sector. In addition to exploring the more rocky perimeter, the hidden caves along the eastern perimeter, you can also access the main Mesa Plateau from here. Entrance to the Spine Burrows. Close to a selection of taken in an adventure is the entrance to a small but significant secondary sector, a cave tunnel to the Spine Burrows, entrance to the Rupture. One of two large gorge roads winds its way to the Rupture sector. It's usually the quickest way from the landing zone to reach Asher Mere, although the road runs by some cliffs. Don't be overly enthusiastic with the Sparrow acceleration. South Cave Alcove. Close to the World Quest start and other exit to the Rupture is a cluster of taken foes guarding a small cave. You may find it devoid of items, or there may be a chest inside ready to loot. Vehicle pad and crossroads south. A small collection of boulders and a circular vehicle pad mark the crossroads of the main roads running along the southern and eastern edges of this sector. Entrance to the Rupture south. Just south of the crossroads is your second exit to the Rupture. Depending on where you're headed to the Rupture, pick this or area of interest 12. Dead Tree Climb entrance 1 and 2. Don't overlook a couple of strange holes in the eastern perimeter rock wall. Both lead to a vertical and hollowed out ancient tree trunk with a small cavern at the top. You can jump up or down the trunk watching for foes as you go. You're rewarded with a region chest and scannable object. Entrance to the Giant Scar. Should you want to view the massive drilling operation occurring at Giant Scar sector, this southeast exit is the one to take. Then there's various adventures. The lost sectors located in those there and what to get. Likewise, a bunch of enemy clusters of taken. It's all taken. It's 11 things of taken. The landing zone, the various patrols you can do, and public events, as well as the secret public events, region chests, scannable objects, and of course the world quest, King Shadow. Does not talk about the Whisper quest because it doesn't exist yet, but that would be roughly the area to go for that as well, which is a shame they took that out, but, you know, that's the game. They brought it back, actually, through a different... I'll talk about it, but cool, you know, to see the area again and live it again through the guide. And it's a shame you can't play it. It had some very pretty places to go, but it wasn't that dynamic there. Finally, to wrap this place up, is the tower, which, of course, is the main area of the game once you beat the game there. Welcome to the Resistance. This social sector has no enemies to concern yourself with. It becomes accessible once the campaign missions have concluded. Think of this as a hub of activity where you can meet fellow Guardians and clanmates, store items in your vault, locate about the scannable objects, and most importantly, trade with vendors. This is where you'll begin the in-game content, trading unwanted items for weapons and armor sets, receiving rare or exotic gear from Ingrams, and purchasing items from the Eververse merchant. You can continue to present tokens to certain traders and gain reputation with Vanguard members and others. Welcome to the rest of your game. Kind of threatening, but fair. Now that the campaign is concluded, the tower becomes the active hub. The usefulness of the farm winds down. The tower should be visited for some additional loot. That glowing feeling. Perspective changes during this time in the social sector. You are in third person and cannot execute your movement mode. If you want to ensure a hot reception for your guardian, why not pick up the object atop the courtyard gantry near the purple ball that explicitly tells you not to? You're in for a lovely time. Why not fan yourself to cool down? You can play soccer games on the main hangar floor. There are various controls to play with, such as light switches on the bazaar stairwell and hangar gantries to move. There is also some hidden treasures, such as those requiring a Ludapalooza key and the dance party key. There are a few entrances that are mainly interesting. There's the courtyard, which is the upper deck, is a central part of the tower with 2 wings to the east, a large covered ship hangar, and the west, a stairwell leading to the bazaar. Some key vendors are located here, along with your vault, a small staircase behind the Banshee shop leading to the maintenance chasms between the tower hangar and other areas. Zavala is here surveying the recent destruction. Bazaar. A relatively small stairwell area links the bazaar to the courtyard. A connecting corridor to the north leads to the dangerous maintenance chasm between structures. Head there if you're keen on finding all scannable objects. It's a festive atmosphere over in the western side of the tower with a plaza and a covered bazaar area, as well as a small central staircase structure. There are vendors here, including Ikora. Hangar East. The eastern side of the sector, connected by a staircase, is a giant maintenance bay and hangar where Cade and Holiday like to hang out. Though there aren't any scannable objects in this area, there's still plenty to do, including a game of soccer on the main hangar floor. There's, of course, the landing zone in the courtyard and some scannable objects within the courtyard as well. Some of them are pretty well nestled and hidden there. Some in the hangar. And then there's your vendors, much like the farm. You've got Darby 5530. You got Tess Everest. She came back. So did Darby. Looks like Master Rahul. Classic. Banshee 44. Another classic. Lord Shax. Commander Zavala. Ikora Ray. Soraya Hawthorne. Cade 6. Got done dirty. And of course, Amanda Holiday to wrap it all out there, who really got done dirty. In terms of all of this here, some of the maps are really useful in this game. Not all of them have the functionality that they used to. It's a shame adventures don't exist anymore, and it's a shame that a lot of the world quests are no longer playable, nor are the resource nodes relevant any longer. As games go, they develop and change them and shift across time. It is a shame that the maps are taken out. You can't visit EO, and you can't visit Titan anymore. There were some pretty cool maps. But it's cool that you can still live it in the guide and see what used to be and kind of imagine yourself in those spaces there. And so ultimately, at this point, this section is not super useful any longer, especially with the removal of gold chests as mechanics and instead focusing on different ways to make the game engaging. But this part of the guide is still somewhat useful. I guess you could still use the maps for EDZ and Nessus for the most part, but it does have some extraneous information, and you'd be better served just Googling it and using the internet. I mean, that's it for any guide. The next section of the guide, the Bestiary, lists all the enemy types you can find. The first dependency in the guide, the Bestiary, lists all the enemies you can find, mostly the infantry units. The overview states, 5 distinct enemy combatant races have occupied various locations in the solar system. All are considered hostile, and Guardians should prepare to engage every one of these as such. Visual evidence and generalized takedown strategies are presented here. Please note, tactics may vary depending on the topography of an area, along with equipment and abilities you use in a particular confrontation. There's a gray box that states, unique foes are elsewhere. This chapter covers enemies you'll encounter more than once, usually with extreme frequency. If you're looking for information on a unique foe, such as a boss hobgoblin or other campaign or strike bosses, consult the appropriate mission chapter. Know your enemy. For each general foe you may face, there are several reference charts you can study. These charts impart some helpful data, and this section of the chapter explains what this data means. Enemy type. This indicates the name of a foe in question. Most of the time, the health bar above each enemy you face will list the name or a portion of it. You can then recognize the hostile you are about to face. Loadout. This shows the main weapon the foe carries. Variants of the same enemy may carry a different weapon and have slightly different survival tactics. This is also the name you'll usually see when you die and check what killed you. Unless, of course, it's killed by the architects, but maybe those guys are actually the final shape. Who knows? Type. This indicates whether the type of enemy is encountered as a base, elite, or boss. A base enemy is a usual infantry foe and engaged all the time. Note that you also encounter toughened base variants with more orange health bars from time to time. This is a sticking point in the Destiny 2 community. I remember that very vividly during Forsaken. There are minor enemies, and then there's major enemies, and then there's elites and bosses, and really doesn't explain it in game super well. An elite enemy heads up a contingent of base foes and has a yellow health bar. This is a stronger foe and poses more of a threat. A sub-boss enemy. There is also a type of enemy existing in strength and power between an elite and a boss, expected to be weaker than a boss and stronger than an elite. A boss is the strongest of that enemy type. It can be faced at the culmination of certain strikes, campaign missions, and patrols. Note the skull in the health bar. Expect an elongated and tough battle. Roll. This indicates the general purpose of the enemy unit when it engages you or a rival enemy in combat. These are split into one of the following categories. Fodder. An expendable grunt with little value to the enemy group except to slow you down. Soldier. The main fighting unit of an enemy race. Commander. The usual leader of a cluster of enemies, which typically is more cunning and has more health. Artillery. Deliver heavy weapons fire. Vehicles can serve this purpose too. Vehicle. Primary mode of transport rather than for combat. Survival tactics. If you want to know the technique for surviving a particular enemy type while dealing with other foes or while you get into position to take them down, check the following tactical advice. This also works as you start to remove health from an enemy during the early to mid stages of combat with them. Area denial. The foe has an attack that takes a few seconds to activate, but then becomes extremely damaging, such as a Cabal Incendior's flame attack. You must preempt this attack before it can occur by engaging the foe in ranged combat. Grenade. Fallen Dreg uses this weapon. Darkness Cloud, Hive Wizard. Close range pressure. You must destroy the foe before it reaches close range, as it becomes much more deadly at this point, such as an Exploder Shank. Dodge enemy fire. The foe has a predisposition for a barrage of rifle or rocket fire or constant shooting of other weaponry. Watch the projectiles and avoid them when they strike. Quick maneuvers are needed because this foe usually fires weaponry with an area of effect damage. Melee pressure. Do everything you can to stop the foe from reaching your melee range. This means spotting them early and defeating them at range, as they usually have a very damaging melee attack. That could include Explode, like a Cursed Thrall, or Berserking, such as a Vex Goblin when they're partially destroyed. Stay in cover. The foe is likely a sharpshooter, and you're encouraged to find and stay in cover to avoid possible damage from the foe's rifle. Stay mobile. The foe can easily damage you severely if you remain in one place, perhaps in amidst a stream of damaging energy. The trick is executing sprints, dodges, jumps, and other maneuvers to avoid the attack. Suppression, line of sight. Attempt to engage the foe in continuous combat and ensure it stays visible to you. Its attack must be suppressed due to the danger it poses, such as a Hive Ogre's energy blast. Takedown tactics. Concentrating your firepower in a particular part of a foe. A takedown tactic known as target practice. When you've decided to kill a particular enemy, check the preferred technique from the list below. Flank target. Enemy has a physical shield. Aside from shooting the shield, you can leap to the side or above the foe, outflanking them so their shield is useless, then strike the foe itself. A shield such as a Cabal shield used by Phalanxes, or a Wall of Darkness, the Hive shield used by Knights. Line of sight. Keep the foe in your line of sight and fire at them, usually from range and while moving in and out of cover. Maintain pressure on a shield. The foe has an active energy shield. Ensure your attacks are continuous so the shield is quickly removed. Break off from combat and the shield recharges, lengthening the fight, which is not desirable. Using energy weapons depletes the shield more quickly. If you match the energy type, a powerful localized explosion occurs when the shield pops. Priority target. This foe is particularly troublesome or works as a shield for other enemies, so you must take it down first. Target practice. This foe can be struck anywhere, though aimed headshots work well. Targeting challenge. The foe in question has an area of their body or a special ability you must focus your aiming attention on, while a regular takedown, such as raking the enemy with gunfire, may still yield effective takedown results. Paying special attention to one of the following areas means even quicker dispatching. Cloak. The foe uses a cloaking device. Track and fire at the shimmering the enemy gives off. Evasion. The foe is particularly adept at dodging. Use your own dexterity and impressive aiming to slow down and eventually kill them. Jetpack. Foe utilizes a jetpack. Leaping over, flanking, or otherwise enabling yourself to see and aim at the jetpack means the enemy will be defeated more quickly. Shield. Foe uses an energy shield. Arc is light blue, Void is purple, and Solar is orange. Use a matching energy weapon to remove the shield easily. Teleport. The foe is able of teleporting short distances, so keep your gun trained on them, even when they blink in and out of existence. Torso. Attempt to target the foe's torso to quicken the takedown process. Weak spot. The foe has a particular area, usually the head or lower torso, that is extremely susceptible to precision gunfire, indicated by the yellow damage numbers. Note, most enemies should be targeted in the head. This tactic is employed for even quicker takedowns. Weakened and beat down. The target is likely to be relatively weak, sprint while firing, and finish the foe with a melee strike. The guide does list Cabal, Fallen, Hive, Vex, and Taken as the enemy classes there, as they were the ones present when the game came out. Because Destiny 2's original campaign focused solely on the Cabal being the main force, we're going to look through the Cabal section of the bestiary to see how that prior section stack up with the information given here per enemy. Warbeast. Loadout, Bite and Claws. Types, there's base, elite, sub-boss, and boss. The role is fodder, survival tactics, melee pressure, takedown tactics, target practice. Found in packs of around a dozen, they attack 3 or 4 at a time. Treat as priority targets as they don't find cover, even if other foes are causing you difficulty. Defeat by aiming at the head at melee range. Just fire at the heads or melee attack and back up, taking evasive maneuvers or finding higher ground to shoot down from. Scion. Threat level 2. Weak spots, head, and jetpack. They use a sniper rifle, a slug rifle, shotgun, or a Cabal Bronto cannon, traditionally in base elite, sub-boss, or boss types. They are fodder. For survival tactics, you tend to want to stay in cover, dodge enemy fire, close range pressure, and for takedown tactics, weaken and beat down. The Scion can launch a projectile ball that causes a rolling distortion along the ground. It eventually knocks you high into the air, allowing them and others to strike you while you're exposed during this unwelcome jump. They also tend to use their jetpacks to maneuver at speed along the ground, though they also head through the air. Fortunately, Scions are only lightly armored, and they don't usually withstand more than a couple headshots or a melee attack at close range. Legionary. They're at level 2. Weak spots, helmet and head front, jetpack back. Loadouts are shotgun, slug rifle, sniper rifle, or projection rifle. They do have base elite, sub-boss, and boss variants. They're soldiers. Survival tactics include close range pressure, dodge enemy fire, stay in cover, stay mobile, and the takedown tactics are target practice. All legionary types have a close combat gauntlet blade, and they charge at their targets to inflict a powerful melee strike. They can also use this blade as a grenade to push you around. They use jetpacks in open areas to cover distance. Shoot them in the head whenever possible. If that's not possible, aim for the jetpack if you're striking from behind. Softening them up with gunfire and melee striking them is also a viable proposition. Incendior, threat level 2. Weak spots, flame launcher backpack, and a jetpack. Loadout, flame launcher. Types, of course, base elite, sub-boss, boss. They're soldiers. Survival tactics are area denial, and takedown tactics are weak spots. Aim for the center of the backpack, behind the head of the foe between the two tanks, and watch the Incendior explode and topple over. This explosion can also coat you in fire, so back away and attempt range takedowns if you're after the explosive dispatch. Time the piercing of the fuel tanks to coincide with the Incendior being close to other foes. This can set off a chain reaction or badly wound nearby Cabal, a little like a grenade does. Phalanx, threat level 3. Weak spots, shield, head, and jetpack. They have loadouts of slug rifle, shotgun, and projection rifles. They can be base, elite, sub-boss, or bosses. They're soldiers. So your survival tactics are dodge enemy fire, close range pressure, and stay mobile. Takedown tactics are flank target, shield, and weak spot. The biggest concern is the defensive posture the Phalanx takes, enabling it and other Cabal forces to hide behind a wide shield, expands when the Phalanx anchors himself in place, react by attacking from the flanks, left, right, or above, shooting over the shield. Grenades landing behind the Phalanx are also excellent. If the shield is up and flanking is impossible, shoot the center of the shield so it retracts and mow with Phalanx down with headshots as it staggers back. The tactic listed of flanking left, right, or above is really helpful in Destiny 1, but at least in this one, they do mention you can shoot the center of the shields. Gladiator, threat level 4. Head and jetpack are the weak spots. Loadouts, thermal cleaver. Types, of course, you can base, elite, sub-boss, and boss. They're commanders. Survival tactics are melee pressure. Takedown tactics are target challenge, jetpack. Arguably the most problematic of Cabal foes to face, gladiators are extremely aggressive. They can charge in quickly and deliver devastating melee strikes. If you can use your dodges and jumps effectively while pressuring the gladiator as it rushes you, attempt to strike the enemy's jetpack, which damages it more quickly than headshots or general fire. Gladiators are always priority targets. Centurion, threat level 5. Weak spot, head and jetpack. Loadouts include rail cannons, heavy slug throwers. They can be base, elite, sub-bosses, and bosses. Their artillery. Survival tactics include suppression, line of sight, stay mobile with MIRV missiles. Takedown tactics, simply line of sight. These walking artillery batteries are of great concern if you're caught in their line of sight. You can be cut down in seconds if you remain an open target. It's better to seek cover or take evasive maneuvers so the Centurion cannot quickly aim and strike you. Move to a range-covered position, start to whittle down the Centurion's health with a good line of sight, and don't stop until the foe falls. Follow up with grenades to stagger before continuing a rapid-fire assault. Centurion, threat level 4, weak spot is head and jetpack. Their loadouts are Cabal Bronto Cannon, Projection Rifle, and Slug Rifle. They can be base, elite, sub-boss, and bosses. Role, Commander. Survival tactics are dodge enemy fire and stay mobile. Takedown tactics are maintain pressure, shield, targeting challenge, jetpack. Centurions have active shields to remove, which are almost always powered by solar energy, so have an energy weapon of this type ready. Kinetic weapons also work, but they take much longer to neutralize the shield defenses. Centurions also like to jet vertically up before firing down on you. Learn to accurately shoot up at them or find higher ground to cover. Remove this shield, then finish the Centurion with shots to its jetpack if you can navigate to aim at it. Or slower takedowns with headshots from either kinetic or energy weaponry. Scorpius, threat level 3. Weak spot is the top cube-shaped section. Loadout is machine gun or flamethrower. They can be boss, elite, sub-boss, and boss. Their role is artillery. Survival tactics, dodge enemy fire. Takedown tactics, line of sight. These machine guns activate when they receive visual confirmation of your presence and then fire rapidly. The incoming fire is highly damaging and can shred you to death in seconds. Use cover, range, grenades, and rapid-fire weaponry to destroy these sentries. Make them a priority. Interceptor, threat level 4. Weak spot, Scion pilot. Their loadouts are rockets. Their vehicles. Their role is a soldier. Survival tactics are dodge enemy fire, and takedown tactics are target practice. Slower than a Sparrow or Pike but more durable, the Cabal Interceptor has excellent offensive capabilities, which are rockets with area of effect damage. Hijacking one requires you to aim for the head of the Interceptor pilot until you execute him. The Interceptor is then neutralized and you can drive it. Otherwise, you can blast the vehicle repeatedly until it catches fire and explodes, which isn't optimal. Goliath Tank. Weak spot, corner thrusters, loadout, missile swarm, slug repeaters. Their artillery vehicles, survival tactics are suppression line of sight, and takedown tactics are target practice. This heavy hover tank can cause havoc with a massive main turret and a secondary cluster missile swarm of usually solar rockets. It can slay you with a direct hit, so remaining mobile is a must. Aim at the corner thrusters until they are set on fire, which damages the tank more quickly than just firing everything you've got at it. Last but not least is the Thresher, threat level 4, no weak spot. It's an artillery vehicle, and the survival tactics and takedown tactics are suppression line of sight and line of sight. Not usually encountered as a hostile, except on strikes when you're able to easily counter it in a Drake tank. This ship usually deposits foes before leaving the theater of battle. You have a slight advantage if you can see cover and rake the engines of the craft attached at the end of each wing. However, damaging the hull until the craft flees or explodes is the main way to tackle it. The descriptions of the enemies are somewhat questionably written there. They don't necessarily read super well, but I will say the tactics are relatively sound, and the information is still relevant even to Destiny 2 today. They may have added some more enemy types or variants, but the general vibe of headshots, backshots, or grenades to take out Cabal is still relatively prevalent, even within today's sandbox. The best area in general, I'm going to have no real complaints about. It's relatively steady and still a useful part of the guide here. One of the only few useful parts, but you could actually make use of that to some extent. Next up in the appendix is the armory, which includes weapons and armor. The weapons and armor section in this guide here have a list of all the weapons stratified within tables, their rarity, and where to get them if you can get them from something outside of a random drop. The weapons section reads as such. Spend enough time in the field and you'll amass quite a collection of weapons. Choosing the right combinations of kinetic, energy, and power weapons can be a bit of a challenge. Luckily, you'll have plenty of opportunities to test out new finds. Every weapon you encounter features an intrinsic perk. Specifics can vary quite a bit, but most intrinsic perks fall into one of 6 categories. Adaptive frame. This perk usually indicates a weapon with balanced stats. Aggressive frame. Weapon features high caliber rounds as a native perk. High impact frame. Weapons with this perk typically favor range over other stats, and they almost always offer improved accuracy and recoil when the user is standing still. Lightweight frame. This perk often indicates better handling or a boost to movement speed. Precision frame. This perk usually indicates a stable weapon with relatively linear recoil patterns. Rapid fire frame. This perk usually indicates a weapon with high rate of fire, reloads much faster when the magazine is empty. As you experiment with new weapons, you're likely to find that many of your favorite weapons share a similar intrinsic perk. The following tables list the bulk of the weapons currently in the game, along with what tend to be the most likely methods of acquiring them. While some weapons are simply random drops, many are given out as rewards for missions or activities, and some of the best weapons can be gained by earning reputation with various vendors. As you review your options, note the weapons are listed in order of rarity, and within these categories, they're arranged in the order you're most likely to encounter them. Remember, you can only equip one weapon of each type, kinetic, energy, and power, and you can never have more than one exotic weapon equipped, but you can always carry a few useful options with you. If a new weapon combination isn't working for you, duck into cover, adjust your loadout. The more options you have, the better off you'll be. Here's all the tables as they're listed here, starting with auto rifles. It does have the kinetic auto rifles, energy auto rifles, hand cannons, also listed between kinetic and energy, pulse rifles, kinetic energy, sidearm, same deal, kinetic energy, with a focus on actually a lot of energies instead of kinetics there. Scout rifles, same deal, kinetic energy, submachine guns, not a lot of kinetic, decent amount of energy. Now it does have a gray box that states the Fighting Lion. There is one energy weapon that stands apart from all the others, Fighting Lion. This exotic grenade launcher features a selection of unique qualities, but the fact it serves as an energy weapon is by far the most noteworthy. Under the power weapons section, which of course are going to be the heavy slot, the purple ammo, fusion rifles, linear fusions, way more fusion than linears, just shotguns. There's 2 exotic shotgun choices. Grenade launchers. The grenade launcher does not qualify between tube loaded and drum loaded, so I don't know why they wouldn't do that. Sniper rifles, rocket launchers, and swords. There's also a note here that says class-specific swords. It's important to note Quick Fang 4BL is only usable by hunters. Crown Splitters is a Titan-only sword, and Eternity's Edge is exclusive to warlocks. Then there's a list of all the exotic weapons available at launch. We're not going to go over all of them. It's just not salient, and there's a whole bunch. What we are going to note is how the exotic weapons have changed greatly from when the game came out to where we are today. The two exotic weapons that come to mind, the most salient, one, the guy I mentioned already, Fighting Lion, and the other is the pre-order weapon, Cold Heart, which eventually you did get access to in the game otherwise. Starting with Cold Heart. Cold Heart is a trace rifle in the first of its kind. It was originally coded and functioned as an auto rifle, getting buffs from auto rifle modifiers. The two main perks worth investigating here are the intrinsic perks and the trait. The intrinsic perk is Cold Fusion. The weapon shoots a steady cold fusion-powered laser. And the trait of Longest Winter, Cold Heart's laser does exponentially more damage the longer it remains on a target. The reason we mention those at all is Cold Heart has gone through a variety of changes. In the current sandbox, Cold Fusion now does what Longest Winter used to do, where Cold Fusion states, the weapon shoots a steady Cold Fusion powered arc laser, dealing more damage the longer it remains on a target. And Longest Winter now periodically generates ionic traces while in its high damage state. What are ionic traces? Current sandbox nonsense by which you get arc power back and upgrades to your arc abilities in the middle of a fight. I'm not going to get into it, but do note that, of course, the armory section is no longer up to date, and some of it, most of it actually, the weapons and armor, are no longer possible to get. In the section that states anything between common and legendary you can't get anymore, and the exotics are so different it's not really worth using this part of the guide here. To finalize this is Fighting Lion. Fighting Lion, when the game came out initially, was panned as probably the worst exotic in the game. It used green ammo instead of purple, and in the guide, the intrinsic and traits are delayed gratification. Grenade projectiles will bounce off surfaces, hold fire to fire and release to detonate. Thin the Herd. Direct hits with this weapon do more damage to shield and enemy combatants. Rapid kills against grenade-damaged enemies will refill the magazine. Oddly enough, Fighting Lion has roughly stayed the same. Delayed gratification is still the same. Grenade projectiles bounce off surfaces, hold to fire, release to detonate. Thin the Herd. Direct hits do more damage to enemy combatant shields. Rapid kills against grenade-damaged enemies refill the magazine. The main difference for Fighting Lion, of course, is going to be its shift from using green special ammo to white primary ammo. Fighting Lion has maintained the same perks, but of course is way more useful now than it was back when the game launched. So in this regard, some of the information here is going to be somewhat relevant, but for the most part, the exotics have changed so much. This is a look back at the original game's design choices. Next up is armor in the armory section. Armor, same deal as weapons. It gives a list of the various sets you can do. We're going to focus on the hunter side of things here, because that's the only class that matters to me. Armor. Your equipped armor determines how fast you move, how much damage you survive, and how quickly you recover lost health. Finding the proper balance of mobility, resilience, and recovery isn't always easy, but it's definitely important. During your adventures, you'll encounter a wide variety of armor pieces. Although you'll find a few one-off pieces, most of the items you collect will belong to various armor sets. At lower levels, your choices are fairly limited. However, as you gain experience and power, you'll come to rely on armor that provides noticeable benefits and a bit of customization. The armor sets in this section are separated by class and arranged in the order you're most likely to encounter them. As with the weapons, likely sources are listed. Make sure to check out the exotic armor pieces available to your class. They're hard to come by, and you can only equip one exotic armor piece at a time, but a lucky find can have dramatic effects. The hunter armor sets, as listed, there's leveling sets, which range from common and common to rare, and in-game sets, which are rare all the way through legendary. A lot of these, actually literally all of these armor sets are no longer attainable in the game, and if they are attainable, they're not going to look the same or have the same stat distributions at all. Completely changed the way the armor works in the current sandbox of Destiny here, so even this list of the leveling sets and in-game sets are vestiges of what the game used to be. When it comes to exotic armors, though some of the weapons have stayed relatively the same or very similar, the exotic armors have changed greatly. Honestly, far more than most of the weapons. Exotic armors have gone through a whole lot of changes, and we're going to focus on two specifically. We're focusing on Mechaneer's Trick Sleeves and Lucky Pants. Mechaneer's Trick Sleeves is a pair of gloves with the intrinsic perk Spring-Loaded Mounting, increases side arm ready and reload speed. That was in the original sandbox. The current load for Mechaneer's Trick Sleeves are Spring-Loaded Mounting, increases sidearm ready and reload speed. While you're critically wounded, swapping to a sidearm increases its damage, provides a large benefit to sidearm airborne effectiveness. So in that regard, they just added functionality to include greater damage if you're at low health, and you can shoot the weapon in the air better than other weapons. Next up would be Lucky Pants. Lucky Pants has the intrinsic perk of illegally modded holster, increases hand cannon reload speed and initial accuracy, with the current intrinsic perk of illegally modded holster, where when you ready a fully loaded hand cannon dealing kinetic damage or damage type matching your subclass energy, each hit from that hand cannon increases the damage of the next shot for a short time against a combatant. Hand cannons ready faster and are more accurate immediately after swapping to them. We can see big changes in the way the exotic armors work within those two pieces for the hunter. They have the same ideas or identities, focusing on one weapon for those pieces, but in this regard, the choices are now more damage focused and less niceties. And so this section, once again, is no longer relevant. Of course, as games update, information and guides go away, but in this case, it's really not relevant with the leveling sets and the perks from the armors having shifted so much. So there's nothing here that I would necessarily recommend somebody use unless you're interested in the old Destiny. Thing that has changed within Destiny in a great way and honestly kind of made the game lose some identity is the trophies and achievements. The trophy and achievement list is still the same. They've only added one other batch of achievements for the Forsaken expansion, and even that Forsaken expansion no longer exists, so they haven't modified those as well. But let's go ahead and take a look at the trophies and achievements listed in the game guide and compare to where they are today. Long and Winding Road, you had to reach level 20. Zavala's Lieutenant, acquire each Titan subclass. Cade's Pathfinder, acquire each Hunter subclass. Ikora's Protege, acquire each Warlock subclass. The People's Hero, complete a heroic public event. Show me what you got. Complete Shax's Call to Arms. In a flash, complete a Flashpoint. Heart of Darkness, complete a Nightfall Strike. The Life Exotic, acquire 15 exotic weapons or armor. Challenge accepted, complete 30 challenges. Belly of the Beast, complete the Leviathan Raid. The Prestige, complete the Leviathan Raid or Nightfall Strike on Prestige difficulty. Lest thee be judged, encounter an emissary from beyond. So, let's talk about what doesn't exist here anymore. Reach level 20 doesn't exist. Everyone starts at level 20. The subclasses do exist still. Heroic public events exist. Shax's Call to Arms may have shifted names. Flashpoints don't exist. Nightfall Strikes do exist. Exotics still exist. 30 challenges don't exist anymore. Leviathan Raid doesn't exist. Leviathan Raid on Prestige difficulty definitely does not exist. Encounter an emissary from beyond. Not in the way the guide meant, but an emissary from beyond still exists. Originally, lest thee be judged, you had to do the hardest PvP activity, Trials of the Nine, and get a full card. I did that the first weekend it was available. Within an hour of it coming out, now you talk to Xur and then you're done. For those not familiar with Xur, he's a merchant who sells you exotics, special gear. These have all changed greatly by the way the game has shifted and sunset the original mechanics by which these trophies were unlocked. It's aggravating that it's changed so much and you can no longer experience something as silly as the Flashpoint or the various raids. Even Trials of the Nine had a vastly different mouthfeel than Trials of Osiris, but that's how they go there. But as it pertains to the guide, who are the authors? The authors are David S.J. Hodgson, Nick Von Esmarch, and Lauren Gilliland, who was the map designer or the cartographer. And these authors have done very, very well with this guide. I'm impressed with what they put out here. As a guide for Destiny 2, it does a great job of listing everything you can and cannot do in the game. It's a shame it doesn't mention the raid or Trials of the Nine, albeit talk about a conflict of interest. If you had the guide, you'd better understand the raid before it even came out. I get it. Definitely don't disagree not having that information listed there. So how does this guide break down? Where are we at with this guide? In sincerity, this guide did exactly what I thought it would do. It's useless. It really is a guide that I cannot recommend to somebody unless they're interested in Destiny 2 when it came out initially. There's nothing in the guide that's useful today outside of the way to reach max level. That's still the same, albeit under a different name. The Crucible information, like how to get better, pretty steady. A few of the strikes, I guess, would still be relevant, and some of the exotics are still 1-to-1-ish, but even still, the only thing this guide's good for is tracking the history of Destiny 2 and what was lost as a game has been developed since 2017. Well, before 2017, but actively iterated upon since 2017. I am upset that Destiny 2 is still oh so very relevant. All this guide has shown me, looking back at it from the launch version of Destiny 2, is nothing has fundamentally changed. You're still flying around in your ship, you're still collecting loot that you hope iterates better, and along the way, you've lost the identity of the loot chase. You've lost the identity of tiered loot. No longer in Destiny 2 can you get whites, greens. It's all purples and exotics. You may get a blue to reach the soft cap when a Destiny 2 expansion comes out, but there's honestly nothing else there. You're never going to use a blue. Blues are just infusion fodder. And ultimately, the Destiny 2 guide does showcase the Destiny problem of no meaningful loot outside of perks on purple weapons that even still only offer you minute increases in damage that don't change the game meaningfully. The builds are not incredibly meaningful in the Destiny 2 guide, and they're especially not meaningful now with sandboxes always changing and things shifting. And at the end of the day, the Destiny 2 guide is exactly what I wanted it to be. A 99% useless guide. Those few sections we talked about are useful, but ultimately, it's a guide for a game that is going through the ship of Theseus. It is under the same name, and it is fundamentally the same there, but all the parts are named differently. Everything has shifted, and when you look at the guide as it stands compared to when the game is today, you can't experience the Red War. You can't experience the strikes as they were. You can't experience adventures. You can't experience the original tokens. There's nothing in there you can experience, and for some of that, that's great, right? Tokens were just an intermediary between getting weapons that increased playtime artificially. They weren't helpful. They didn't give you anything. But the lack of a campaign, the lack of a centralized narrative, the lack of an easy-to-access introductory point for players is devastating. And the Destiny Content Vault has made the guide useless and has made Destiny 2 always on a backslide, where to get someone into Destiny 2 is impossible because there's nothing to do until you reach a certain level cap, and then you have to jump into a campaign you don't understand. The chase for loot is meaningless if you're not connected to the world you're playing. And the Destiny 2 guide does a great job of connecting the player with the world, but you cannot connect the guide with the game anymore. It's just not possible. And so, comparing the Destiny 2 guide, which is an actually useless guide, to something like Guitar Hero 2 or Rock Band, which appear useless, in sincerity, the Guitar Hero 2 and Rock Band guides in the prior video are more useful than Destiny 2 because you can still play those games in their entirety. You may lose some functionality, but the guides and the information in there are still relevant. Of course, the Guitar Hero 2 guide was still better, but there's nothing going on in the Destiny 2 guide that you could still use today. If someone were to slap that guide in front of you and say, make use of it today, best I can offer is strikes, and that's it. It's a catalog of a game that once was and a game that it still is, but it's all under a different name and it's no longer playable. That's the fear I've got when we look at live service games and games that are consistently adjusting and coming out and changing as the content goes on and the years go on. You lose the identity from before if you're not careful. Final Fantasy XIV has avoided losing the identity by focusing on building the game up from a start point to an end point and still keeping activities relevant through loot grinds and chases, so there's always an activity going and always a community going. But Destiny 2 decided to do the Disney thing of put it in a vault and take it out later, and it hurt the game's identity. There's no single narrative you can play that makes sense for a new player. The Red War in that guide, when you read the missions for the Red War, we looked at Chosen, it made it sound so cool, it made it sound so interesting, it gave it an identity and had a clear focus. You were getting your light back. You were fighting against an oppressive force that was easy to track. You knew who you were, where you were going, and why you needed to do it. A devastating franchise, and the guide is a casualty and all that. Beautiful guide, well written, well designed, great maps, wasted effort. So what comes next for this video series? We've covered a guide that's literally useless. You can't get anything out of it within the current game state, and there's nothing we can do. We've covered guides that are mostly useless. We've covered guides for the same game and how they can differ, and we've also covered what makes a decent game guide. It's time we cover what is held as the worst game guide ever created. It's time for Final Fantasy IX as published by Brady Games and enhanced, of course, by Play Online. Thanks so much for watching this video on the useless guide known as Destiny 2 for a game that is still grossly playable, but wholly incomprehensible. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Make sure to leave a like and hit that subscribe button. Naturally, ring that bell like Anita Ward. And if you had anything you'd like to say, leave it in the comments down below. If you want to view the rest of the game guide playlist, here it is on the left side of the screen. If you'd like to see what the Destiny 2 guide author Nick Von Esmark has done as well, make sure to click on this playlist here where I play Super Mario 3D Land with his game guide. Appreciate y'all. Catch you next time for some Final Fantasy IX. Take care.